I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting, February 4th, 2020, to order. May I have the roll, please?
Sure. Commission Member Sanau.
Here.
Commission Member Novitsky.
Here.
Commission Member Hoyam.
Here.
Commission Member Schill.
Here.
Commission Member Kaiser.
Here.
Commission Vice Chair Ferriandino.
Here. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve the minutes from December 3rd, 2019. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, we're going to start with our public hearings. First is going to be planning case number 2020-0201, a conditional use permits for a brew pub.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ryan Gertman. I'm a consultant planner with Northwest Associated Consultants. I've been helping Aaron out since he's been short-staffed here. So it's great to be here. Nice to meet you all tonight. So this is a conditional use permit for a brew pub at 4001 Central Avenue Northeast, more commonly known as the Columbia Heights Mall. The applicants have applied for a brew pub that will serve craft beer made at other breweries, craft beer made on site, as well as smokehouse barbecue. By code, the applicants the code requires that they obtain a conditional use permit for the brew pub side of the business. The site is located in the Central Business District, which does not have a parking standard, so the parking requirement is satisfied for this application. The site is, as you guys know, is a multi-tenant retail site. There's restaurants, retail, a transit hub, and a child care center that are also on this site. Let's see if we go back to the site plan there. In review from staff, the city engineer noted that as a condition of approval, they should have poly trash containers as a way to mitigate noise from putting trash into their containers out back. The trash containers are adjacent to multifamily housing to the back there, and as a way to mitigate noise, the engineer has recommended poly containers back there. And on kind of going out of order here too a little bit, one of the conditions of for the conditional use permit is they do have to have a three-sided enclosed trash container as well. So that'll be a little bit of a change from what's back there right now, since there is no screening for any of the other tenants. As far as pedestrian and bicycle access for this site, it's well served for pedestrians and vehicles and mass transit on the site. Staff is recommending the applicants put in 4 bicycle parking rack for bicycle parking to satisfy the comprehensive plan's goals, which want to encourage pedestrian and bicycle access to this site. As far as neighbor notifications, we sent out neighbor notifications to everyone within 350 feet as part of the conditional use permit. We had phone calls, emails, and mail from residents that both supported the project and also expressed concern related to noise. Mainly was noise was kind of the big concern with this project. As a recommendation, staff has added to the recommendations of approval that no alcoholic beverages be allowed outside of the enclosed building. No customers are allowed outside of the rear to the east side of the building. And on this site plan here, this is where the brew pub is going to be. The customer area is mainly going to be, and then this would be kind of the out back, the east side of this site plan is kind of funky because it doesn't, north doesn't face up on this site plan, but that would be this area back here is what I'm referring to, which is adjacent to a multifamily housing complex right behind that. And also that the establishment complies with all local, state, and federal laws pertaining to alcohol sales and service. That would be a pretty standard condition that we would apply to this type of application. Some additional kind of key conditions that we've added is that byproducts and waste from the production of malt liquor be properly disposed of on the property. That's a requirement for the conditional use permit. So we've added a condition that the applicant just provide a narrative on how they intended to dispose of the byproduct. So with that, staff is recommending approval of this project with the conditions that are outlined in your report. There's 16 conditions there. I won't read over all of them. I know you guys are all well-versed in what's in there. So we'll be looking for action on one item tonight, and that with this application, and that'll be the approval of the conditional use permit. So with that, I can answer questions from the commission, or do you have something you were to?
Recommending that the
Yeah.
city council recommend.
Oh, yeah,
Recommend to
sorry.
the council that they approve the conditional use permit.
That's a good point. And just so everyone here knows, we're not actually approving this tonight. We're deciding whether or not to pass it on to the city council.
Yeah.
Great, thank
Sorry.
you very much.
Sorry.
No, that's great. And we're going to start with questions from the commissioners, and then we're going to open it up for a public hearing right after that. So let's start down on this side. Eric, you want to just go right ahead?
So I have a couple questions. Do we want to just go one at a time, or you want me to just fire them off?
Go right ahead, yeah.
Okay. Just a clarifying question. So we have two separate applications for the brew pub and for the arcade, which we'll talk about next. But we have a single site plan. Are these projects connected? Is it they both go or they don't go? How connected are these?
These are two separate applications, yes. Sorry, I was going to mention that up front. So these are two separate applications, two separate applicants, and two separate business owners. They kind of run parallel because they're right next to each other. But yeah, we are only looking at the moment at the brew pub, and then we'll do the arcade next. So there's two separate conditional use permits.
Okay. Go ahead.
So we'll do questions and
If I could-
comments on just the brew pub portion right now.
If I could just add a few comments to that narrative. So there is connectivity shown in the site plan between the brewery and the arcade, and that's something that we're going to discuss more in the arcade application because there's a prohibition on alcohol within the arcade. And one of the things that we're working through with both applicants, although they're separate entities, they do plan to feed off one of each other in terms of business activity. And there's a desire by the arcade group to approach the city to lift the prohibition on alcohol consumption in the arcade at a later date. So we're going to be figuring that out, but we need to guard against the commingling of the two uses now with these CUPs. So we want that to be very clear that at this point we can't create that mixing, even though they are right next door.
So you said something a little vague. You said they're commingling from a business perspective. What does that mean exactly?
So and they could speak to this better, but the brewery believes that arcade patrons would be patrons of the brewery and vice versa, that they're complementary uses to be in the same.
So they'd share a kitchen or?
No shared
I see.
space in any sort of contractual arrangement,
All right.
just, I think making.
There just may be an overlap in customers.
Exactly, overlapping customer base. Yep.
Along those lines, is there,
Let's just go right down the line. That's
sure,
all right.
sorry.
Yeah, Eric, go ahead.
Signs will be handled in a separate permit application. Any other physical changes to the exterior of the building proposed by the tenants?
No, no patio or anything like that, or no outdoor dining. Yeah, I assume we'll get a sign permit application at a later date, and I believe that is a condition of approval that they go through the proper channels to get the signage put up. Yeah, but I don't have any architectural drawings of the signage yet.
Sure. That's all I had.
Great.
I think it looks good. I think with the enclosure of the garbage containers and the poly, the only other thing is if it gets to be an issue, we could always maybe not dump after 10 o'clock to make sure, that the noise is minimal to the neighbors, but less impact. That's all I got.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, I've got a question. It says that the brew pub does not have a specific distance requirement to a childcare. Does a brew pub have a distance requirement from a church or a grade school or anything like that? Is it just, my question is, did child care center get forgotten when they made the list?
The answer is no, there is no distance requirement. What I was referring to in the report was that there is a distance requirement for bars and that type of alcohol service, but a brew pub does not have that requirement.
Okay, that was my only question.
All right, great.
The the trash can concerns, are those a response to neighborhood concerns, or is that part of what we require?
It's my understanding that the trash can noise and the garbage trucks and that has been kind of an ongoing noise complaint with that site. So the engineer recommended if they use plastic, then it's not going to be as loud when garbage gets, discarded in there. The screening part is part of the conditional use permit approval. So that's a separate requirement that's in there, not related to the neighbor concerns.
Will there be an interior connection between the arcade and the brew pub?
So as of right now, it appears that, that these are two separate, that this wall travels all the way through. You can't see it on this, image, but, I believe it's right there. There appears to be that there's some type of a thoroughfare or a causeway or something that's, not a solid door, but not a solid wall, but some type of access to the other side. As of right now, this is a separate application and you can't have alcohol in the arcade, no questions asked as the way it stands right now. So as it stands right now, these are two separate applications, but it's our understanding that the applicant is probably going to wish to change that in the future with the ordinance amendment,
Okay,
which would be a separate application in a few months.
okay, thank
And
you.
a change in the ordinance would have to go through the city council.
Yeah.
As well as this body.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what would be the hours of operation of the facility?
They didn't submit that. It's not required as part of their, as part of the CUP, it's not required that they submit that. They will be limited to the hours that the other alcohol establishments are, which I believe is 1 AM is bar close. But I don't have the specific numbers. So however, 1 AM or earlier, depending on what they want to do.
I think it would be a great question for the applicant to get a sense of hours of operation.
Yep. All right, thank you very much. Aaron Ryan, is the applicant here?
Yes, we do have
Great.
building owner as well as the brew pub operator owner. in
Great. I
attendance.
would invite you all to come on up if you can, please. Answer a couple questions for us. And if you want to, we'll just go the other way for these if you'd like. If you guys have any questions for the. And please, if you all could, whoever's going to speak, just state your name and address, please.
Okay. My name, William Roberts. My address, 3519 Lincoln Street.
Great, thank you very much.
Yep.
Any questions?
Yes, in the application, it said that there would be 4 bike spaces proposed. Were you guys planning on doing that minimum number, or were you planning on doing more? Just that seems oddly low.
Yeah, and that was not, we would want more, because we feel that there's a lot of bike traffic to brew pubs, so yeah, we would definitely want more than 4.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about the hours of operation you're planning?
Yeah, we're proposing, we will be open for lunch and dinner, so it'll be 11 AM to 9 PM, Monday through Thursday. Friday and Saturday, 11 AM to 12 PM, or 12 AM, sorry. And Sunday, 11 AM to 8 PM. So well within the 1 AM regulation.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm just curious if you guys are going to be more, like, what's your focus? Will it be the restaurant side of it or the brewery side of it?
To be honest, it's a good combination. We want to bring the restaurant, the food aspect, without taking away the tap room feel. We don't want it to feel like a restaurant. You're coming to a tap room where you can also get amazing food.
Sure. That's all I had.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Take-home growlers or whatever they call them?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
you'll be able to take home growlers and crowlers.
The what and what?
Crowler,
I don't know what that is.
crowler is a 24.9 ounce can.
All right.
That's it.
Well, I think it sounds good.
What's your proposed production level on the brewery side?
Starting production be 900 barrels for year 1.
That's within the limit. I think we put some limits on a brew pub when we approved them. Is that
The
well
limits have
within it?
been fluctuating over the past couple of years, and that's part of the licensing requirement. So in addition to the conditional use permit conditions, there's a whole nother contingent of licensing requirements where the production limits come into play.
Okay.
All right, very good. Any other questions? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I'll now open it up to a public hearing. If anybody would like to say something, please line up right behind the podium. And as you can see, we got a lot of people who probably want to say a few things, so we'll ask you that we keep our comments brief and to the point for everyone's benefit. Please state your name and go right ahead.
My name is Tony Beltran. I live over in LaBelle too. I'm the board president. So I've gotten a lot of people expressing concerns about this coming in. But I had a chance to talk to Tim, and I've heard what's been said here. And what the concerns were are, people heard tap room, they thought bar right away, bar fights, rowdy people coming in on Friday nights, all that sort of thing, an arcade, teenagers hanging out, drugs being dealt and all that. Everything I've heard so far describes a very different scenario, which is more kind of what I expected personally. So I would say that it sounds to me like, first of all, you guys are asking the right questions, and second of all, it sounds like this could be a good thing going in. We missed the school because the people were so well behaved. It was a really good school, but we have to have that place filled. You can't have it standing empty. So to me, this sounds like a good plan, and this is the story I'm going to bring back to the people in our association. Thank you.
Sir, could you fill out one of these for me so we can just put the name?
That's good to hear.
Okay,
Yeah,
just give it back to you.
wonderful. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Please, come right up.
Bob Folkus, 3966 Reservoir Boulevard. I was looking for information, but I think it's been answered. I didn't know what space was being considered. It sounds like it's the north end of the mall. And it probably also then there's no question of a distance requirement for a public building like a city hall.
That's correct.
Thank you, Bob.
Hi, my name is Linda Stage, and I'm a resident of Parkview Villa, which is the building, that abuts the alley. And we too have a real concern about noise. I'm pleased to hear about the plastic, bags, and that it will be enclosed. That's a huge improvement. But we're also concerned about the traffic through the alley and the times of the traffic through the alley, times of deliveries. Right now, the restaurant and Discount 70 both get deliveries at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, which is very disruptive to us. And we understand that the store being vacant is also, I don't want to say hazardous, but it's detrimental to the community. We just want to be sure that our concerns are heard and that we all work together to do the best that can be done in this site.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I remember reading something about the hours of delivery. Is that?
That's what I was looking for,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
As a condition of approval, I thought we had one as well.
Was that maybe in the arcade
It
application?
might be.
I think there's definitely something about trucks only going to the loading area and not.
I thought it was in.
Well, when the public hearing is done, let's talk about that and see if we may want to add that as a condition.
Condition number 8 just says that they have to have all their deliveries to the rear of the building, no deliveries to the front. The front is a fire lane, that's where I was going with that.
It's absolutely something we can discuss and add if we need to. Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Russ Bednarski. I'm an owner at LaBelle 3. I think I've left a few messages. I'm concerned as a broker and a contractor and a whole bunch of other things as far as, one, from living so close to it, I can hear them every day, literally every day working on it as a licensed contractor in the state, as well as a RRP contractor. I called and wondered what your hours of operation are. The police were called a couple of times for noise already with the construction. Is the building already done and ready to go? Is this just a kind of a placating meeting here, or is this where you're still objective to it?
I can answer. So the building owner has a permit for demolition right now, and all that's taking place is demolition activities, no tenant improvements at this time. So it's
Well,
demo.
I have pictures. People have been in there, painting contractors, hardwood flooring contractors, demolition with noise exceeding decibel levels in the evening. Police were called. Police are not aware of the fact that you were going to put a brew pub in there. They weren't consulted at all, which bothers me as a broker. As far as the neighborhood, most people are pretty much, it took me, I think, is Kevin Hansen here? No? Took me almost 3 months to get the waste management not to come at 4 o'clock in the morning and empty their dumpsters. And now I'm looking at a brew pub, and from being around northeast Minneapolis, what is said and what is thought of is not necessarily what really happens. And the people around it are affected. As a broker, I see that detrimental to the area. I don't know if you did any surveys of what would be really good to put in there. I would think possibly some sort of store would be better than a brew pub. The area right there has no store. I mean, Hy-Vee is not going to go in down there. I'm quite sure of that. So I really don't. I know that the city will get money of revenue whether or not it's occupied or not. So it's not like a loss of revenue to the city. I think maybe from what I've been seeing there that this has pretty much been, and I've been gone, I just got back 3 weeks ago. I can see this being worked on every day, literally every day, from 7 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. You have people out there emptying. I'm not sure if they know what a dumpster is. A dumpster is where one end opens and you slide it open, and then you walk in with your garbage and put it in there. These people are just throwing it over the side, so you can imagine an empty dumpster. It sounds like gunshot is going off when they throw the stuff in a dumpster. The people in the condos there, you got 225 units there of people. Most of them are seniors, and there's not a lot of young people there. Really don't want a brew pub there. And I think if they wouldn't have the idea of not being able to change City Hall, they'd probably be here. I, as a broker, am interested because my value of my property is on the line. And this, to me, will negatively affect it. You want to see pictures of them working at night
No,
or
that's
video?
fine. Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, if I could address one comment.
Sure.
Specifically, the police chief has reviewed these plans and has met with staff as part of the development review for this proposal and is very well aware of all of the dynamics. His concerns relate to any alcohol concern within the city, just that they have the ability to enforce licensing requirements should there be a nuisance that arises from the use, and then making sure that we create a clear distinction between the arcade and the brewery at this time.
So what you're saying is, as a company that's reliant on their liquor license, that gives the police a little bit more authority and power to enforce those ordinances.
Indeed, that's the primary vehicle for enforcement with this type of use.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Ma'am?
My name is Diane Kruger. I also live in Parkview Villa. I'm on the alley side, so I get all that noise. I don't hear the construction stuff. I get all the garbage cans and the beer bottles from the other end and so on, but that wasn't my concern. It is a concern, but it's not what I came up to talk about. I came up to talk about is the smell and the byproducts possibility from the brewery. I mean, it's nice that you're gonna try to keep the noise down and like 10 o'clock so that they don't put the beer bottles out after that between 10 and 7 in the morning. That's great. But we also, wind blows north, east, south, and west. I mean, what are we going to smell from that? I mean, personally, I don't drink beer, so isn't necessarily something that I would want to get into, so.
All right, very good. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else who'd like to speak to this? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Natty Severson. I live at 4353 4th Street, so admittedly not right near all the noise, and so I appreciate people's concerns about noise and your efforts to mitigate sort of the noise and making sure they're meeting the standards of what we would want to have in our city. But I do want to talk about the upside of this. I know I met the family who is interested in doing this because our boys swim together, so they're in the community, they're members of this community, they really love Columbia Heights and want to be a part of this, and as part of how they're doing this, they've really taken it, broadening the scope of people they know. They really want this to be a community-centered, a family-centered thing, as I know their family. It's fun to watch the videos they're putting out as they're trying to get people interested in this. I'm excited what it can do so near the new development of the new City Hall condos. You can sort of get that like collection of fun, eclectic things with Dairy Queen right there and Heights Theater. It seems like a fun little area, and the more we can get more variety of things, as much as I would appreciate the tax revenue of a store, I think this can add to a community feeling that I think we all hope for. And on a side note, I have tried both their beer and their barbecue, and it's actually fantastic. And so I don't know if that matters to y'all, but I think they've got a product that can stand up in a busy market. And I know my friends and I, we travel outside the city limits, even just to Fridley, to Forgotten Star now, and Northeast, and it would be nice to stay in town and see that tax revenue go back to our city. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Whoever's next there.
Hello, my name is Minnie Hinton. I also live at 965.
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please?
My name is Minnie Hinton.
thank
I also live at 965 40th Avenue. Yes, we do have that problem with the noise, with the garbage cans, the trucks bringing in products and produce. I would like to suggest that if it was possible, that Chicago, that building, can get windows from Anderson's to close up the noise. They sell those kind of windows. We won't hear the noise in the back. So I would suggest if we can get a type of financial proposal to have that downtown building, that would eliminate the noise from the neighbors who don't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Ken Block. I also live at Parkview. And I've also went to the HR, ERA meetings over the years. And it is just a little sidelight. My understanding is the alley belongs to the strip mall. And it's zoned commercial. And the city talked to waste people. There was 4 or 5 trash haulers. And the gentleman was saying they worked with Waste Management, but there's at least 2 still trash vendors there, and they come in as early as 2:30 in the morning. So my comment is, if they're doing the brew, they're gonna have maybe dumpster pickup every day, depending on what their turnout is. I don't know if the city could kind of control that a little bit.
Yeah, we can definitely add a condition for both that and the deliveries.
Because it's deliveries, been there 13, 14 years, and I could set my clock from 11 o'clock at night, and just about every store that was in there had something coming after bedtime. So anyway, that's the only comment I had on
Great.
that, was that there's
For Ken?
some legal restrictions.
Great. Thank you, Ken.
I got a quick question. It seems
Ken,
that we have two.
Do you have a question for Ken?
No, yeah, right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There seems to be 2 issues, the noise in the strip mall itself, and then the noise in the brew pub. Can the city do something to, we've only got 1 hauler for a residential. If they got 3, 4, whatever, doesn't make sense for a strip mall. And can we make some requirements to quiet it down?
I think we can certainly make a condition of this CUP's approval for loading and deliveries, but to apply it to the entire mall at this meeting, I don't.
No,
think we
not
can
at
do
this
that.
meeting, but
Yeah.
can the city twist some arms and
I
say,
think
hey?
we need to
do
look
something?
at, I don't know that we have an hours of operation for loading and deliveries within the nuisance ordinance. It's something that we'll look into.
All right, good. We're going to stay on track here.
Okay.
And go ahead, we have more comments. Good comments, but I think they need to be addressed by the city council.
KT Jacobs, 4104 Monroe. Not adjacent to the area that we're talking about, but as a resident that's concerned about things that are happening in Columbia Heights, I just want to support that some steps be taken or some considerations be made on behalf of the residents that are in that area, and that I was kind of shocked to just hear that we allow, as a city, we allow deliveries at 2:00 in the morning, especially when it's adjacent to residential areas. And I would encourage both the Planning Commission and then the council to be very cognizant of that and take some positive action to help the residents out in that way. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Good. Anybody else want to make a comment? All right, great. At this, oh, yep, come on up.
I can't stay too long, but I was talking to the city development people.
Can you state your name, sir, please, and your address?
Kerwin,
Wonderful.
Kirwin, and I had some frustrating. I care about bars and stuff, and I drive by there, and I almost had to stop at the bar when I talked to the community development officer here, because the former guy, whose name was Joe Hogaboom. Do you guys know who that is? Okay, he was particularly involved in 4400 Stinson Boulevard. And so I care about bars and stuff, but I wanted to also just say that for people like me that have to come in and drop off legal process or ask, I really don't really appreciate the way I was treated this week. So I don't know if you want to give some kind of resolution that people, and I'm going to think you're going to find the merits of the people that are helping me and everything is all legit. So I really think bars are really important, and I go to them a lot, but I think that in the future, and I was talking about my relatives, and you know why I had to bring that up? Because that was the only way I could get your attention. And I say, yeah, my dad was the justice of the peace of Hilltop back in the 60s. My family's, half you people here probably have been here. Were you guys even here 3 years ago? Well, my family's history goes back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, court cases, Supreme Court cases, William Mitchell Lasco, St. Thomas Lasco.
Do you have any comments on this particular case, sir?
So I'm just saying, I think that I'm probably a good representative of the average person, and I'm just here to kind of say that I dropped off. You're probably very interested. Is anyone here on the actual city council too?
Do you have any comments on this? Because that's kind of what this section is for. We're trying to keep our focus on this project.
I didn't know, the itinerary wasn't real clear which is going first. But so I guess I'm just kind of making sure, touching base with everybody. If, I don't know, I would think maybe you might have some questions about my case or whatever. But so it's going to involve a lot of procedural stuff about, he quoted the city attorney, and which is kind of sensitive because a whole bunch of reasons, because you can't just quote attorneys, and you got to make sure he wasn't reading off a piece of paper or nothing. And so would you agree that that's going to be, would you agree with me that that's going to be an issue?
I would agree that your issue, we're well aware of Mr. Kerwin's concerns. He's been in a few times over the weekend. It is not.
But it was 3 years. It's not like coming.
Just hold a second.
Okay, we're going to have a civil discussion
Yeah,
here.
it's not related
civil as they
to
get.
this case, and we're trying to work with
Yeah.
Mr. Kerwin to get him the answers that he's looking for. We've engaged the city.
Okay,
attorney.
and then, just real quickly, and I'll be out of here in 2 minutes. The reason I brought up the fact that my mom and dad were in China is because they're rushing this whole thing through, and they went through he got turned down at the zoning committee right here, and for some reason, he got passed through the city council, and there was you didn't have open meeting, you didn't follow open meeting rules, is what I'm gonna argue, and that there was no public disclosure, that I said, my mom and dad are in freaking China, and I got 6 days that I have to come up with my legal case. I just recently found out about this. And so you gotta slow this whole process. And that was brought up by 2 different neighbors. The setbacks were brought up by 4 different neighbors.
There's setbacks on this?
It's a totally unrelated case.
Okay, well, sir, thank you very much. We appreciate your comments,
Setbacks
sir.
are absolutely related because I brought that up, and that was, TJ made an announcement that he was gonna follow the same setback as everybody else, and he didn't follow it. So that's a whole another thing that you guys are gonna, and there should
Thank
have
you very
been a
much for your
variance
comments.
meeting. And so I want everyone to, kind of, keep up on this, because there might be a point where you have to bone up on it.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, are there any other comments on this case? All right, at this point, I will close the public hearing. And I would ask if the developer could come on up for just a couple more questions from Railworks, please. Yes, thank you. There's a couple more questions from the commissioners. Stan, you,
Yeah, the odor was brought up. I don't know how much, if any odor emanates from a brew pub or not.
No, I mean, it's very, very minimal, honestly. With a ventilation system, the majority of it is in the brew house area, which is actually closed off inside. If you look at the plans, it's in the center of the building. Yeah. So this is the brew house area right there. So that, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that is completely enclosed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
there was also, any other questions from the commissioner? Yeah, go right
I
ahead.
actually have two questions. And my background is in brewing, so I won't get too carried away. How big of a brew house are you going to have?
10-barrel system.
Okay, and as far as the concern for the spent grain, that's the waste that we're talking about, do you guys have a plan in place for that already?
Yeah, we'll be working with local farmers, but also using poly barrels, sealed poly barrels, so concerns with any smells coming from spent grains.
Sure.
To mitigate that as well.
Right, so, yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Great. Anybody else have any questions? So there was a couple questions from the people here about the hours of delivery and also your trash pickup hours. Do you have any comments on that, or because we're probably, from what I can gather, we're probably going to be discussing that and might be imposing some additional restrictions. Do you have any comments on that before we do that?
And I'm Denise Roberts and also live at 3519 Lincoln Street. And I was actually pretty shocked when I heard people mentioning 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, because I certainly have no plans to be at my business at that time to be accepting deliveries. That sounds unreasonable to me. I expect my suppliers to fit my schedule.
Right.
I expect
So are there any, do you have any, if we were, I don't want to have us just arbitrarily set a time.
Right, I understand, yeah.
So please tell me what would be reasonable for you, and then
Well,
we can
I-
decide if that's reasonable for the
Sure.
community.
I would expect, I mean, even though, yes, we're planning to open our doors to our customers for lunch beginning at 11 a.m., yes, we do plan to be there earlier in the morning.
Sure.
Could be as early as 6 or 7, prepping food. I don't anticipate any deliveries prior to that time.
Okay, and you wouldn't have any deliveries after the dinner hour?
No.
Okay, so if we put restrictions in place, 9 o'clock to 5 p.m., that would be totally fine with you?
9 might be a little on the later
Okay.
side.
8?
8 would probably be quite
7?
reasonable.
All right.
Or-
All right, very good. Well, that
You
gives
know,
us an idea.
just to
We're going to
give you
talk
an
about
idea,
it.
yeah.
Good, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You'd like a little bit earlier in the morning, correct me if I'm wrong, 6 a.m.?
Well, 7 potentially, but
I think
it's-
2 a.m.
we
we
are
can
a
all
kind-
agree is unacceptable.
Absolutely.
I think,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
We don't-
sounds very
pretty,
reasonable, unreasonable.
I believe there's deliveries taking place in the city as early as 6 a.m. in many places. And I guess as a basis, I would suggest 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. to start from.
All right. Great. Do any of the commissioners have any thoughts on
I've got some
that?
thoughts, but not
Please.
for them. Well,
No,
no,
this
this
is
the time.
Thank you very much. Our hearing is done now, so we will now have a discussion, and
I think 6 o'clock is a good wake-up time.
6 a.m. All right. Anybody else have any thoughts? Or
I don't know if 10 p.m. is too late. I wouldn't think so.
Establishment Could be open at that time, so I think I would consider it reasonable.
Sounds reasonable to me.
So
With the restriction for the trash to be picked up between 6 and 10 also,
Yep.
Yeah.
so
All loading, deliveries, and trash hauling between the hours of 6
6
and
a.m., 10 p.m.
Shelley, do you want to make that to
That's
point
okay
number?
with brewers?
No.
Aaron,
this is-
6 a.m. to
not
10
there.
p.m.
On the
for
side,
both?
is there
garbage
anything
and
that could possibly be done
deliveries?
to consolidate the trash pickups? Work with the tenant, it's a multi-tenant building, so if we consolidate the amount of trash that's being picked up, or the times that it is, so it's one big noise instead of 4 noises all throughout the night.
But that's gonna be something on a different.
That's something completely different, but that's more on the city side. That's
We also
the-
don't have the authority to do.
We don't, right. That would be, separate from this.
Great. Any other discussion then? All right, Shelley, are you okay with making that change?
Yes, I have it.
6 a.m. to 10 p.m. on condition number 8? Or are you just going to add that as a separate condition?
Wouldn't that be
condition number 17, Brian, aren't we?
Oh, I thought you might amend number 8, since that talks about deliveries.
Yeah, number 8 is deliveries. We can add.
Okay.
It says no loading or delivery shall be allowed from the front of the building or between the hours of, or only between the hours of 6
Only be
a.m.
made during the hours of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Correct.
Yes, I will add that to
Any objection to that, any commissioners?
Oh, you gotta include the
Great.
garbage though, right?
The trash haul.
all
Yeah.
deliveries,
We said loading and
loading
delivery.
trash collection.
Trash collection is fine,
Deliveries,
absolutely.
Loading and trash collection.
Correct. There we go. Is that all good? If there's no objection, we'll just add that to the motion then. All right, I hear no motion. I hear no objection. Is there any other discussion on this? Any other discussion on this point? All right, at this point, I will entertain a motion to waive the reading of the resolution, there being ample copies available.
I'll make that motion.
Great.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded that we waive the reading of the resolution, being ample copies available. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. I'll now I'll now entertain the next motion.
I'll motion to recommend that city council approve the conditional use permit as presented, subject to the following conditions, in addition to the one on the garbage and the delivery time.
That's right. And the conditions that are printed in,
Yep.
There we go.
Right here.
Second.
Yep.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend to the city council that they approve the conditional use as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to case number 2020-0202, a conditional use permits for an arcade for Starcade LLC.
Thank you, Chair. This is a conditional use permit at the same address, 4001 Central Avenue Northeast, for to operate an arcade. So this is a separate conditional use permit that's being applied at a different tenant site at the same shopping mall there, just to the east of the area that we were just talking about. So the applicant has applied for a conditional use permit to operate an arcade. They plan to have on over 200 arcade games, pinball room, private party room, as well as non-alcoholic beverages. They will also need a license to operate at this site as well as a conditional use permit. And it should be noted that they're applying for an arcade, not games of skill. Games of skill is a different license that some of the other establishments in town have, which it limits you to 8 games or less, and 9 games or more is an arcade. So that's what they're applying for here, is an arcade, not to confuse the two. Those are two separate licenses. And the engineer kind of reviewed this project along with the last one, and also recommended the use of poly trash containers in the back. That's the only trash hauling condition that we've had attached here. The arcade does not have the trash screening requirement that the brew pub has. So that was not in my conditions of approval, because it's just in
Was that
the,
intentionally left off, or?
it's not in the requirements for the CUPs, so I didn't include it. I mean, we can certainly talk about that here and decide if we want to add that or what we want to do, but it's not required, so I left it off. So. And with the pedestrian and bicycle access, I added the same condition that they do add for bicycle parking stalls to meet the comprehensive plan's goals. The site, of course, does not have a parking requirement, and it has transit and pedestrian access is already satisfied for this site. When neighborhood notifications went out, I actually put them on the same mailing as the brew pub to save on stamps and paper and everything. And again, the main concern that we got was noise related to the arcade, with the trash hauling and also it just being a arcade. Arcades can be loud. So I added a condition, or 2 conditions, that no sounds from the arcade can be audible at the property line of the subject site, and no customers are allowed outside of the rear of the building to the east side. So very similar to the brew pub requirements. In review of the conditional use permit requirements, the applicant is compliant with all 9 requirements, so I didn't add anything to the conditions of approval in that regard. And then I did go through and review the licensing requirements for the arcade, because that does come into play here quite a bit, mainly with the alcohol requirement. As of right now, as we kind of touched on a little bit ago, they are not allowed to have alcohol in the arcade, and there is no workaround to that right now. You can't have a catered business come in and serve alcohol. You can't have people bring their own. The ordinance actually says no alcohol, and, you know, and end of story. So I put in the conditions of approval that, that they comply with all licensing requirements, as may be amended from time to time. And we can talk here tonight if we want to put in a actual prohibition in the conditions of approval, for alcohol. And what that would do is if they wanted to have alcohol in the future, they would have to apply for an ordinance amendment, and then they would have to apply for a CUP amendment. And then they would, so it would create more transparency if we did that. Staff and I discussed with staff, and we chose not to put that in there as a proposal up front. But if we're not comfortable with the application as it stands, that's something that we could do. And sorry, I know.
Let me just add a little bit of clarity. So
Yeah.
if we had a condition of approval into this CUP for a prohibition on alcohol, it would require amendment of the CUP after an ordinance change. So at any measure to bring alcohol into this space, it will have to go through an ordinance amendment after this hearing. So
Right.
totally separate.
And the difference would be the ordinance would apply to any arcades within the entire city, whereas just this prohibition that we would add to this would only be for this property.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think it makes sense to leave it out of the CUP because if the licensing changes, we've been transparent on the front end that that's their desire. It would not be a surprise. I think the conversation on a staff level, once we receive this application and having done a review of the arcade licensing requirements, find them to be a bit antiquated and from an era that we're not in currently. Arcades have certainly changed. The police chief would concur with that summary assessment and believes that there's a way to merge these two uses in a similar fashion to surrounding communities. We just have to be careful and thoughtful and figure out the best way to approach that. And we've started the conversation. The applicant has a desire to file for a text amendment in a subsequent planning round, maybe as early as the next round. So,
Are there any other arcade licenses in Columbia Heights?
currently no arcade licenses. So we do have games of skill in a few locations, the pool halls and things like that, up to 9 units. So one of the prevailing conversations has us potentially eliminating arcade licensing or lifting the prohibition of alcohol, and then having games of skill just being an unlimited amount. So we would still license the games themselves, but arcade.
That sounds like a discussion for another day.
Sorry, it
No,
is a
that's
bit
fine.
confusing, but yeah.
I appreciate it, but yeah, I think let's stay focused on this then. Great.
There were quite a few staff discussions on the arcade license as it stands right now. So the only other item I was going to mention is one of the licensing requirements is that the premise has to be, or the inside of the premise has to be visible from the outside. You have to, if you're standing on the outside of the business, you have to. The requirement is that if someone were to look through the glass, they would have to be able to see every spot of the arcade. And staff feels that that's an unreasonable requirement. I don't understand how that would work anyway with glare and everything from glass. So we've added that the city would waive that requirement, and instead they would allow the city staff to inspect the premise at any time during business hours. And that's a condition of approval in the back. It's actually in there a couple times it's in the license requirement, and then it would be a condition of approval for the CUP as well. I feel that stems from a time when they were worried about playing hooky from school, and that was there to prevent that. And I don't think that's going to be the case with this application. So to sum it up, there will be action on one item tonight, the approval of the conditional use permit to to permit an arcade at 4001 Central Avenue Northeast. So just action on that one item.
Great, thank you very much. Go ahead, do you have any questions for city staff?
Yeah, same question I had with the brew pub. 4 bike parking spots seems kind of hilariously low for a use that would presumably attract a decent amount of bike users.
So I'll let you into our thought process a little bit. So there is no condition of approval for either permit for bike parking. It's a stated goal within the comprehensive plan in several locations. This is a transit-oriented development district, and we want to drive and promote pedestrian traffic. We came up with a number that we thought both parties would be amenable to, and because they're next to each other, we'd have a total of 8. It seems as though the brewery wants to exceed that and would be agreeable of that, or to that. We could also ask the arcade if they would, consider a larger amount. We could stipulate that.
It's not hard to picture a scenario where, say the brew pub had a lot of bike parking and the arcade had 4 slots where, one would be subsidizing the other, and that doesn't seem appropriate.
I agree.
That's all I have.
That actually leads into the question I had with, we have separation where alcohol is being served and then the arcade. How much of that, as a city, are we expecting before any of these changes take place that we're discussing, without getting into that whole conversation? How much overlap are we expecting? Like if they share a bike rack, is that something that we're okay with?
I think that would be okay as an example. The separation is an ongoing conversation while we're in an interim period pending any sort of change to the licensing. We're working closely with the police chief to try and figure out something that they're comfortable with, and enforcement is always going to be the challenge. We set this up, 2 CUPs. We know how they want to operate. And how do we ensure that, they don't cross the yellow line on the floor, so to speak. So that's a bit of an ongoing conversation. Outside of that, the CUP conditions, they can meet them now. So we can't stop it because we know their intent. So we can allow the CUP and enforce that issue if it becomes an issue, and I guess we'll have to monitor it with the intent that, again, I think we can carve out a way for them to coexist and their support for that. We do need to first stop as a pit stop with the city council at a work session to gauge interest on these changes. We made the applicants very aware of these dynamics and thoroughly discussed this with them. That it's not contingent and there's no guarantees, and maybe suggested that was, were we putting the cart in front of the horse, and do you want to pump the brakes? And their response was no, we understand the environment and we'd like to move forward with the CUP. It allows them certainly to move on the tenant build-out portion, and then if the prohibition isn't lifted, that's their responsibility, and they would have to deal with that. So.
All right, very good.
I'm done.
All right.
Done? Well, I got a couple questions. Number 11, the applicant or manager, 21 years old, and that person is supposed to be pre-approved by the city council. I don't think the city council wants to be a HR department. And the 21-year-old, I would think a 20-year-old might be able to manage a arcade. And then the second one is no person under 14. I don't know if that's legitimate today or not.
Yep. So those are the requirements to get a license. So it's hard to,
well, if it's
to
the law,
just
we're
say
not
that.
gonna have any flexibility on that.
Yeah, it's hard to
the law,
just
it's
say
the
that
law.
we're just, we can't just say we're not going to enforce it, but because it's there, so that's what we have to enforce.
Outside of the
Whether-
alcohol
yeah.
prohibition, the entire license needs an updating.
And then the other
Yeah.
question I have is the pool hall on Central there. That would fall under the arcade license as far as I can see, and it's got alcohol.
No, so it
actually
would be
games of
the,
skill,
this is where it
right?
gets confusing, games of
different
skill,
licenses. This-
9 or less, games of skill.
So the pool hall has a lot more than 9.
They're licensed for 9 or less. And
Yeah, games or pool tables.
Both,
Yeah.
you add them together.
pool tables are outside of that.
It says right here. but not
They
limited
are
to pool handles.
licensed as a game of skill, that is correct, but they have a separate pool hall license which encompasses those games of skill under that also, as a separate license. Similar to the arcade license would have games of skill also, but because it's strictly a games of skill business, where the pool hall has food and other things involved in it, the arcade would only have that, so they don't have to get the separate games of skill license under it. I know it's confusing.
It's confusing. I don't even know what the definition of a game of skill is.
There's some overlap that we've uncovered through this process, having never licensed an arcade in the
Sounds like this-
city.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, so we know we need to.
Sounds like some outdated.
Indeed.
There was a lot of staff
Ordinances
time
need to be
just
changed.
going through the ordinance just to figure out what was what, so, because we've never used this ordinance before.
When was it passed? Any idea?
1981.
Really?
Was when it was first passed, and I think it was.
1952.
And I think it was,
Some of it read
yeah.
that way.
That would have been about the time you and I would have been going to arcades, right? All right, great. Thank you, Stan.
That's it.
Okay.
Well, I think we're, you guys all there brought up the good questions, and, I think we got the answers I need to hear.
My questions have been answered.
Great, wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, does anyone here have any questions for the applicants? Okay, great. At this point, we'll open it up to a public hearing. So if you have comments, please come on up here, fill out a card, state your name and your address, please.
No, you're.
Yeah, and if you've already commented, you don't need to do
I
another.
just have one question. It's about the the bike slots. As you know, when you're driving through the parking lot there, it's pretty tight, and oftentimes there will be people that stop to drop people off and all of that, so they can't be out there. They can't really be on the sidewalk and have bikes sticking out blocking, because there are a lot of elderly people that live in the condominiums over there, and when the weather's nice, they'll be walking along that sidewalk in their walkers, and so they're not gonna be able to get around bike slots in front of a shop. So where do you intend to put the bike slots?
Can we?
Aaron, do you know that answer? Or?
I don't know of a specific location. I believe there's a peninsula that is in front of the brew area. If we have an aerial, perhaps building owner could comment on that, Tim.
Hi, my name is Tim McLaughlin. I represent Columbia Heights Center. The bike racks and such would be a responsibility of the landlord, so we'd provide that as needed or as you're directed. Yeah, there is an issue of where to put them. I'm well aware that area is really tight along the walkway, and I was thinking about that as the discussion was going on. We've got some areas in which I want to, in the future time, augment for the brewery and for more outside seating a little bit, just patio area, nothing real substantial. But there's areas, maybe have to consume a handicap stall and provide some special areas outside that walk purview to create, a nice bike area. Bike, parking or bike racks and such, my interest is to service people coming to the center and make sure they're happy coming, and the more I can do to make that happen and make it work, that's our goal. So if we need more bike racks, I'm definitely gonna get more bike racks.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so we'll kind of figure that as we kind of unravel this thing where we're actually gonna do that.
Sounds like there's going to be some work to be done, but there's some options.
And I'm sorry we had New Horizon was under construction, and as you understand, they're open during the day, they got kids, and it's hard to say, well, we're closing down to remodel. They only do it every 10 years or so. And so they were aggressively going after it, trying to get everything done. I apologize to you, sir. Yeah, okay, okay, thanks.
All right. All right, whoever's next.
Katie Jacobs again. Just a quick community question. Because we're dealing with adolescents in the arcade and we've got adult beverages being served on the other side, I'm interested in knowing what the owners of those businesses have in place, what kind of methods they're going to use to control the alcohol remaining where it needs to remain on that brew pub side. And if they could give some feedback on that, that would be great.
Fair question. When we're all done with the public hearing, we'll have them come up.
Thank you.
Hi, Linda Stage. again from Parkview Villa. I haven't heard anybody mention the hours of operation. And that's certainly something that we would be concerned about. We also have issues at Parkview with drugs and drug sales in our parking lot. And it's a long time since I've been in an arcade, but I'm assuming it's still adolescents and young adults. Are we going to have extra police patrols? How are we going to be safe?
Okay, good question, thank you. Aaron, do you have any comments on that right now, or you want
I think I would just add that we expect a different client base with arcades as we've seen in the market. I would defer to the applicant to answer some of those as far as his target market and who they're intending.
Great, thank you.
And the hours of operation are limited to 7 a.m. to midnight under the license.
All right, very good, thank you.
So are they gonna have, Russ Bednarski again. Who's gonna control? Is the city police gonna be going in there monitoring underage, smoking, vaping, drug sales, loitering?
Well, I would imagine.
What happens,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'm just saying it would be like any other business. If there's a complaint, the police would investigate.
So the business would be liable for monitoring itself?
I don't have an answer for that, Aaron, do you have one?
Yeah,
Is there
I
a
mean,
lawyer here?
yeah, so the business is the first line of defense for compliance with any regulation, and if there's a nuisance, then yeah, it's investigated by the police. We don't anticipate routine, stops into either of these establishments until we receive complaints that would drive that compliance checks. There are compliance checks for alcohol sales annually by the police department at any alcohol sales facility, as well as cigarette sales. There won't be that on this location. So if they're smoking or vaping indoors and it's observed,
So there's a no smoking ordinance at this arcade?
statewide would carry through both of these.
So the owners or the arcade people would be the ones to reinforce that?
Indeed.
Not the city of city of Columbia Heights Police Department?
The police department could enforce that. The problem, of course,
Would
is
that be?
catching it in the act.
Would that, there's your problem. So when it happens, is it going to be picked up by the taxpayers of Columbia Heights to monitor the arcade?
I think we do rely on residents to bring complaints to the city, and that is the way that works.
Is there extra police gonna be put on?
Not
You
at this
hiring
time. I
extra
mean,
police?
it's kind of innocent until proven guilty. If they prove that they can function the way that they're supposed to.
Well, and the police department doesn't fall under the purview of the planning commission. That's the mayor. So
Well,
it
I'm
might-
just saying that,
I would
you know,
suggest that
good
if.
planning
Yeah.
eliminates any problems post hoc.
Let me just add to the licensing requirement, that is the lever of the police department. So if there's considerations for violations of any ordinance, the license could be revoked. So that's the layer that is important in both of these applications from a law enforcement perspective. That's how you can stop bad behavior. That would require a
City council?
city council, yep.
Thank you, Russ.
Diane Kruger again. This is just a question for understanding part on my part. You were saying that they're gonna, for the sound, that, so it's gonna be kind of soundproofed to keep the noise inside the arcade?
Yeah, a condition of approval that I added was that you can't hear the arcade at the property line.
Okay.
Everything's going to be indoors, so I think that's a reasonable expectation that we wouldn't hear the arcade on neighboring property.
Yeah, you went by it so fast, that's why I wanted to double check.
Good, thank you.
Tony Beltran again. With this, you were talking about the issues with kids hanging out, problems, that sort of thing. What I haven't heard mentioned yet, and it just got me thinking about it, security cameras. Is there any requirement for security cameras that would cover the place? Because if there's complaints, you're not going to catch people in the act. We had the problem in our own condo. We got 8 security cameras. Now we may increase that. And so if a complaint comes in, you should be able to go back in the security footage and be able to see the actual problems without the person that's making a complaint having to prove it. So can you guys make that a requirement for both places to have security cameras in there to cover the areas
We're
where?
not sure if we do have the authority to do that. Aaron, do you have
That'd be
a?
under the license.
I would, it's certainly not a requirement with either CUP. I think that one crosses a line, in my opinion. I mean, conditions are negotiated between the property owner and this body, of course, for ultimate approval by the council. I think we can assist with the installation of cameras through another city program, actually, on this corridor, and I would encourage these locations to apply for a security grant that we offer. Might be an alternative solution to find that out. And I would also ask the applicants if they anticipate having surveillance at either location already as part of their business plan.
Well, it'd be good to hear tonight, because with the concerns that have been brought up, this would be a real obvious tool to help, alleviate some of those concerns. So it'd be good to hear that tonight.
Thank you very much. All right, if there's no other comments on this particular case, we'll close the public hearing at this point. I would ask if the applicant is here, if they could come up, please. We have a couple questions for you. And I'm just going to go through some, oh, sorry, please state your name.
Oh, hi, Paul Sarnin, 66 Monarch Way, North Oaks, Minnesota.
Great, thanks, Paul. So, yeah, obviously we heard a lot of comments here. What are you guys going to do to kind of make sure that we don't have any crossing of the borders between the two different businesses?
Well, right now, I mean, they're two separate establishments. So, I mean, there is, the front door will be monitored, and there'll be signage that is applicable to the city ordinance.
Okay, very good. Do you have any objections to the deliveries and trash pickup between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m.?
I do not.
Great. And what are your hours of operation going to be?
So, we plan on being open from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on the security camera issues?
Yeah, I mean, in our business plan, we'll probably be doing some form of consumer grade security. So we have a lot of very expensive arcade equipment that we want to monitor as well, on and off hours. So that would handle that situation as well.
Great. Do any of the other commissioners here have questions?
What kind of, just because there's been a lot of talk about the target market you're attracting,
Yep.
do you have any research, or I guess what kind of audience are you expecting?
So before we decided to open this business, I traveled around the country and visited dozens of arcades and different models to see what worked best. Our primary target audience is 30 to 55, and they're professional. If they do come with children, they bring their families, so it is going to be a very family-friendly environment that we want to establish. But again, one of the pieces we talked about is part of our business plan is corporate events. So we have a plethora of Fortune 500 companies in this area, and they all have desired and expressed interest in being able to have events at our location. So we're trying to do our best to fit within their, the customer service standards that they're requesting.
And so the arcade that you're looking to put together would be something consistent with, like, would you call it a vintage arcade? Or
So yeah, so we would have a classic. The majority of our games would span from the 70s to the 90s. So that would be the bulk of our collection. Most of them would be. We will be. We haven't decided exactly how many pinball machines we'll have, but we also have pinball machines. Yep,
that's all I got.
Any other questions from the commission? Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Is there any discussion on this before we move on to the motions?
Just we'll have to make the amendment inside here for the deliveries and.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Shelley, can we add that without objection? We'll add that condition as well to this. Great. Any other discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion. And those are listed on page 8.
To close the.
To waive the reading first. The public hearing is not closed.
I'll move to waive the reading of Resolution 2020, there being ample copies available to the 20. But, 2020-0202.
Is that correct?
Okay. That's what it says.
No, yeah.
Yep.
That's the case number, but is that also the resolution number, Shelley?
We don't have resolution
Don't have
numbers
a resolution
assigned.
number because this one's going to the city council.
Very good. All right. Great. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We waive the reading of the resolution. There be ample copies available to the public. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Entertain a motion to recommend.
Motion to recommend that the city council approve the conditional use permit as presented, subject to the following conditions listed 1 through 12, or 13.
13.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend that the city council approve the conditional use permit as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, wonderful. We will now move on to case number 2020-0203 for Contractors Capital Company LLC, Columbia Heights Assisted Living Facility.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a preliminary plat, final plat, and site plan review for Contractors Capital, who has applied for those items at the vacant lot that's currently known as Hussett Park Outlot B. The applicant had come in 2019 and received approval of a 3-story assisted living facility. And after soil tests were done, it was determined that that site is not going to be able to hold a 3-story building. So the applicant has come back and is now requesting a single-story assisted living facility on that same site. So this is an all-new application, separate from last year. It should be noted that the plat that they had received approval of was never recorded. So the property remains as an outlot as of right now. So the site is zoned mixed-use district. So in the mixed-use district, this would be an allowed use. It's a senior living facility, by definition would be allowed under the mixed-use zoning district, which only requires that the use be similar to other allowed uses in other districts. So at the same time then, because it's mixed use, there's no setback requirements for this. But it should be noted that the building is now on the other side of the property from the original application. So if you were familiar with the old application, where the building was situated along Jefferson, it's now along McKenna over here. And so the parking lot has been flipped around, so it's quite a different project from last time.
And just to confirm, there's no access from Jefferson, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So the applicants are proposing a 29-unit facility. It'll be a mix of assisted living and memory care. By code, they're required 15 parking spaces, and are proposing 18. And they will all be surface parking. So the underground parking is no longer part of this application like it was with the previous application. And the site access is going to be along McKenna Street, up in the northwest corner, kind of underneath the red arrow there on the private drive. So the engineer reviewed this project and has requested a 15-foot easement along the north side of the property and a 5-foot easement around the rest of the property, as well as an easement dedication underneath the parking lot where the stormwater drains to. And the site plan actually does show those border easements already on there, so the engineer is basically recommending approval of what the site plan shows. In regards to the right-of-way designation, this site includes this section of property up here, according to the survey, and this is the road that runs right along in here. And so that is a right-of-way that doesn't have any recorded access. It's well, we don't know what the history of that is, but right now the road runs over private property. So the applicants are proposing to change the property line that would fix that error as part of this application. So that corrects an error in that part, so that's always a good thing. The applicants did submit a photometric plan. I don't have a slide of that because I didn't think it would show up on this. But they are proposing 10 parking lot lights, which would be on the east side of the property. I don't think I have any more site plan drawings. Yeah, so the site lighting then will be along the access up here and then along Jefferson up there, as well as attached to the building, so.
And that's where the parking lot is.
Yeah, where the parking lot is, so adjacent to the industrial uses to the east side rather than the residential uses on the west side. In regards to snow storage, this is it's a very tight site, and as a recommendation of approval, that the applicant would be required to use those extra 5 parking spaces that they're proposing would then be designated as snow storage in the wintertime. Or alternatively, they can come up with a different plan of either snow storage or snow removal. Neighbor notifications went out to the 350-foot radius. I didn't have any correspondence from any of the neighbors on this project, so we just kind of ended it at that. And so we'll be, with that, we'll be looking for action on 2 items. It'll be a recommendation on the preliminary and final plat, and also approval of the site plan. The Planning Commission approves the site plan at this level. That does not carry on to the council. So the conditions that are outlined in the report would be then attached to that site plan. And then I have 4 conditions of approval that would attach to the plat that then gets sent on to the council. So we'll be looking for action on 2 separate items as part of this application. Yeah, so, and there's an architectural drawing of what this unit will look like. That's looking to the west, so that's going to be the front of the building. So I can answer any questions that the commission might have.
Great. Let's go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, question for the city here. Looking at the site plan and the access to the site off of McKenna being so close to Hussett Parkway, was there conversations between the applicant and city as far as managing the distance between access to Hussett and access to the site being that close? Are we concerned about backups of cars, ease of navigation between those 2 intersections?
So that was discussed during the development review, including comments by the city engineer acknowledging that it is in close proximity, but accessed off a private street, which is about the best we could do for this arrangement. The roundabout limits access off of the public streets, and a low intense parking use that assisted living is. We don't anticipate much bottlenecking there, and it will be acceptable from the engineer's perspective, but a pinch point for sure. But I think we can deal with any congestion that would arise there again, because many of the residents don't have vehicles. We're going to be dealing with predominantly staff and guests coming into the facility.
All right. Very good.
So what I'm reading, we're having 18 spaces and 2 handicaps, so we're gonna have 5 extra spots.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Great.
The plat drawing shows 28 parking spots. What am I looking at? 11 plus 10 plus 7.
There it goes.
I think it's 27.
It's 27.
Yeah, 27.
And then what does it mean that the, under the parking lot is got an easement? I mean, I don't understand that.
So there's a drainage system underneath the parking lot that collects the stormwater, the surface stormwater, and then it moves it through a snake of drain tile before it then gets discharged out towards Hussett Parkway over here, where it connects to the city's stormwater system. So the engineers requested an easement to have access to that drainage system. If
We don't own it, then we just have access to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, as part of any significant redevelopment project, we secure an easement over the stormwater features so that if the owner is not taking care of it, the city can go in and maintain or fix without consent, more or less. And then there's also an operations and maintenance agreement that gets executed to specify, you know, the requirements and how and when the city has authority to intervene. So it's recorded separate from the plat, just as a.
Okay. And do you have an answer for Stan's question on the parking? Do we know exactly how many parking spots there's going to be?
As indicated on the site plan, there must have been an error in the report.
Right.
So
But they're well above the minimum.
well above the minimum. Yep.
So there's not gonna be 28.
No, there is going to be whatever's indicated on this site plan, which is
Oh, okay,
27.
so this is
yes.
better, well, then there's no question on parking after that.
Yeah.
Except they're all small.
They are compact size, yeah. That was addressed in the report, absolutely.
No, I apologize. Okay, so the plan that you guys were given in your packet has actually been modified. We did direct to them that they had to have compliant stalls, and the stalls have been increased to 20 feet in depth. So drive aisles and stall depth and width are compliant now.
Okay, great.
We received revised plans late last week, I think, so that.
Right.
must
Any
have
other
missed,
significant
yeah.
changes that we haven't seen?
No,
Yeah.
there was a summary report included, and I'm gonna take a scan of that just to make sure. But it was in the packet. I can just find it. Where their team responded to development review comments.
One more question. Developers shall pay park dedication, or, how much is that? What is that? How is that gonna be determined?
That's part of the development agreement is they'll agree to a park dedication. In this case, it'll just be a fee that they'll pay to the city, and the ordinance has a function as to how you calculate that based on the size of the
not written
development.
here.
I don't know if we have the number.
It'll be per ordinance, so it's 10% of land value is what the ordinance reads.
Is that what it is for everybody, even a residential?
For a new plat, so the park dedication comes into play with any new plat, and the code states that the formula is 10%. If they don't give 10% of the land area of the project, so cash in lieu of a land donation is 10% of the value of the property.
That wouldn't include that piece of that corner that are they gonna come back and say that should be part of our?
The
Mark fee?
framework that we've discussed is the purchase price that they are under contract for will set the value of the property.
What they're deeding to the city, where the roundabout is gonna have nothing to do with that,
Correct.
okay?
It's a road, not a park, so it doesn't count.
All right.
Yeah, that wouldn't be an eligible donation anyway. All right. Go ahead. All right, any-
Yeah, my concerns are related to defining this property as mixed use, when it seems like it's pretty, two uses, including memory care in there. And also, the fact that the comprehensive plan calls for high density here. And, this is a single-story development. I understand that there's an issue with, I think it was contaminated soil under the site. So I'm wondering how restrictive or how bad is the soil contamination? I mean, would this preclude a more intense development if somebody came in with a different proposal looking to spend more money? And some clarity on how this is mixed use or high density, because it doesn't seem to be either.
Yeah, so high density, I would agree, the previous proposal was more dense, obviously, and I think the soil conditions have led to this conclusion, and staff are accepting of the reduction in units. City engineer has reviewed the soil report from submitted by the applicant, and it was twofold. It was suitable for construction as far as load bearing and then contamination, so it was double. And I could have the applicant perhaps speak to that more, but so they moved the building to avoid disturbing some of the contaminated soils that they don't have to remove if they don't disturb them, and then also to get onto the most suitable area of the site. I think by any measure, it is a pretty small parcel, and even at 29 units, I think we've done as good as we can, and it's an acceptable compromise from, they tried for the project that was desired, within the comprehensive plan guidelines, and I think have proven to the city that that isn't feasible. So I don't know if that answers your question. Mixed use applies to the entire district, so each project does not have to have multiple components. It is, the district accepts a variety of uses, encourages vertical and horizontally integrated uses, but does not say that the parcel has to have all three or two different uses on each individual parcel. The intent of the mixed-use district was to just integrate them throughout. So the entire Huset Park redevelopment was intended to accommodate a variety of uses. It's all become housing, as we know, and I think staff are certainly comfortable with this as a transition in this area between what's already there and in the industrial district. I don't think it would be a site where we could expect to drive any sort of commercial activity, just given its,
That makes sense.
And it's been tried there many times,
Right.
for many years. I mean, we've been trying to get that property, it's been empty for quite a while,
Okay, good.
from my understanding.
Right, indeed, and at one point the city had worked, Dominium is the current owner, and it's actually been sold, but they sold to this developer, and they had no interest in the size of the site. They had approached the city a year or more ago for the potential acquisition of the property, and we declined at that time. So I think all things considered, when we look at this district and this being the remnant, kind of aptly named, the little parcel that was tough to figure out and now has contaminated soils and soils not suitable for a significant foundation, this is a pretty good landing spot, taking all of those considerations into account.
Thank you, that's all helpful.
Stan?
I think it's all a good idea, but I don't understand. You just can bury or leave the contaminated soil buried, don't touch it, out of sight, out of mind? How's that work?
So there is an element of that depending on the contamination. If you don't disturb it, the pollution control guidelines say that you don't have to remove certain types of contamination. I would defer to.
Is it if you build a bigger foundation, you have to disturb more of the soil? Is
Right,
that
so,
the idea?
for example, underground parking would disturb almost the entire site under the previous plan, and any sort of basement would get into all of those soils that they don't want to disturb. So it was a twofold contaminants that they didn't want to disturb, and then again, just suitable for construction without deep foundations, all led to this conclusion. I think the applicant could articulate kind of that evolution a little better than staff could, but it's a very challenging site, and I think the fact that we can get any significant development even of this size is a pretty good compromise.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Do any of the commissioners have questions for the applicant? No? All right, great. At this point, then, we'll open up a public hearing. If anyone has any comments on this project, please come on right up here.
Hello, I'm Patrick Vital Schwartz. I live at 3861 LaBelle Street, so I'm right across from this lot. Sorry, I'm the neighbor that didn't contact you earlier. Apologize. We're just wondering if there is a construction timeline for this project yet, if that's been approved or when that'll be starting.
Would you point to your,
Oh,
he's got the laser right there.
Thank you. So that is me right in that middle unit right there.
You're going to have a really good view.
Yeah, we'll get to watch the whole thing.
I would defer to the applicant to comment on.
All right, good. We'll have the applicant come up then and answer that question.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
then most of my other questions have been answered, and it was mostly about parking, where the driveway will be. Obviously, living on McKenna Street, and you mentioned that that is a privately owned street that's owned by and we kind of maintain that at the homeowners association there. So I don't know if there's some level that they'll contribute to our HOA to help with street maintenance.
So there is a contractual relationship that Dominion had with your group that carries over to the new owner. I would again defer to them as far as their responsibilities. It's under review by our city attorney to prove that they do have access rights onto McKenna as part of this. And it is a condition of approval that has to be verified and vetted.
Okay, so are they still discussing which side of the property the entrance driveway will be on?
And I'm sorry we didn't have a site plan.
Oh, no, that's okay.
You can take this with you too.
Oh, thank you.
So you're here somewhere, and
Mhm.
here's the entrance on the north end of the subject property. So roundabout's right here.
Yep.
Yep. So right there, parking on away from you.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can.
All right, yeah, thanks, I will take that. Yeah, those are my only concerns.
Great, thank you very much. Is there a representative from Contractors Capital here? If you could please come on up here.
Hi, I'm Jerry Tullifson. I'm one of the managers of Contractors Capital.
Great. Jerry, what's your answer for the question about schedule? What's your time
Okay,
frame?
Well, a lot of it depends on what happens here tonight, of course, and what happens through the city council. And then how fast we can meet the requirements and conditions that are set forth in front of us. A lot of it then has to do with the soil correction. Until we actually get into the excavation and the removals and the corrections and those types of things, it's hard to give a definite timetable. Our hope is to get it set and through the springtime and into the fall, get it constructed, get the foundation and some of the flat work and that type of thing done yet this fall. Construct over the winter and have it open and ready by next summer.
When are you going to start with the soil?
Again, it depends on the conditions and when we can get this approval.
When it melts, everything.
Yeah. It certainly won't be until probably June or July.
June or July. It very good.
It won't be before that because it's going to take that long to get everything done.
Sure.
I did make a couple of notes, and I think I brought them with me. The parking has changed from original plan. We have 18 parking spots, then 2 handicap, and then off to the other side, there's 7 more
Okay.
parking spots. Those 7.
There's 27 total.
There's 27 total, and we're trying to designate those 7 as snow capture. And so we still want to keep the 20 if we can, and have 7 for the wintertime plow.
Okay.
And I think that would have shown your most recent plan. And then as far as any association, whatever needs to be done, we're certainly a willing neighbor to work with the association. If there's some dues or fees or whatever we pay to keep the road maintained, we're certainly willing to participate in that type of thing too as well.
Good.
Park dedication, we talked. The chamber system, I think, has been explained, so if you want, I can explain more about the storm sewer and water. But
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for the applicant here? All right, very good. Thank you, Jerry.
all right, thank you.
Great. At this point, I will close the public hearing then, unless there's any other comments. Seeing none, public hearing is now closed. Is there any discussion on these points? If there's no discussion, we can move right into the motions, which are on page 8, where there's 4 of them, and we'll just go right down the line.
I move to waive the reading of resolution. This
You
is
say
another
about
one
resolution, that's fine.
of this resolution. There being ample copies available to the public.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We waive the reading of the resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
I move to recommend that the city council approve the preliminary plat/final plat as presented, subject to the following conditions 1 through 4.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend that the city council approve the preliminary plat and final plat as presented, subject to the conditions listed there. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. That will go before the city council, Shelley,
February 10th.
February 10th. So if you have any comments for them at that point, that would be good. This next part is just for the planning commission only. This will not go on to the city council.
I move to waive the reading, there being ample copies available to the public.
What page are you on?
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we waive the reading of the resolution. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
I move to adopt this resolution, being a resolution approving a site plan for Contractors Capital Company LLC for the proposed senior living development subject to the following conditions, and there are 16 of them.
Second. Nope.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the resolution, being a resolution approving a site plan for Contractors Capital Company LLC. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, and that will be signed this evening then. All right, that's it for that one. We'll now move on to case number 2020-0204, redevelopment and rezoning for the Columbia Heights City Hall project. Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Aaron Chirpick, Community Development Director. Thank you for the introduction. So the next case has quite a bit to unpack, so we'll try and get through it as quickly as we can, and just start by saying the staff are very excited for the potential associated with this project. The location outlined in red on the screen there is 3989 Central Avenue at the intersection of Central and 40th. The site, the Northeast Bank Building, as many people know it by, a 6-story office tower that's been vacant for several years and has been a priority redevelopment site for the city for a very long time. The overall project that we're contemplating includes 6 parcels, again occupied by the 6-story office tower that the city recently acquired in the summer of 2019, the adjacent municipal parking ramp on the east edge of the site that's been owned by the city since the 80s, and then a single-family lot that now serves as a stormwater retention basin on Gould Avenue. So that's the project area. The project includes a complete redevelopment of this site, so that includes removal of all of the current site improvements, the bank building and the municipal ramp, and the single-family lot was cleared several years ago. So adjacent land uses in the area are the Central Business District to the north, west, and south, and R3 multiple family residential zoning to the east, and then single-family R1 as well to the east. So, just to give you a sense of what's going into the project, there's 3 primary components. It's a vertical mixed-use development that we intend to rezone for PUD, or planned unit development. It includes more or less a 21,000 square foot new city hall, a 3,400 square foot cafe or coffee shop space, and 265 market rate residential units with best-in-class amenities and underground parking. So just to provide some context for the project so we can visualize it as we walk through, this is a rendering. You're looking Dairy Queen there in the front to the right, but that's the intersection of Gould and Central Avenue, essentially looking northeast. And just to highlight some of the components, there's the City Hall space along Central Avenue, the cafe space, and of course the apartments above. So when it comes to land use approvals, there's 3 distinct actions that we're contemplating. The first and kind of primary approval is planned unit development rezoning. So rezoning to PUD would create a new district specific to this project area. So the underlying zoning is mixed use currently. The PUD allows for flexibility in development standards. Specifically for this site, we're going to be looking at flexibility related to parking and density, residential density. A little bit of background about the PUD within the history of Columbia Heights. So for many years, starting in the 70s, the city did have a PUD zoning district that was eliminated actually in 2001 and was replaced by the mixed-use development district. In 2018, the PUD was brought back. In review of kind of the evolution of that decision, the mixed-use district was not performing in a way that was consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan. And this commission, as well as the council, elected to bring it back for projects specifically like what we're contemplating this evening. So a little bit of history I think is important in describing how that has evolved. So we have the rezoning, and then within the PUD ordinance, there's actually the need to approve a PUD district plan, which is essentially a site plan. Okay, but we call it the PUD district plan. It has all of the primary components that a site plan approval would have. The key distinction is that that is not approved by this body. That does get pushed up to the city council, whereas a typical site plan would stay here. So that site plan requires a separate public hearing at a subsequent council meeting, which we would have at the end of the month. And then we have platting, so a total replatting of this parcel, and some easement vacations to clean it up. I think the easiest way to describe it is just clearing the slate, wiping out, all of the underlying property boundaries that are in the background and easements, and we have to move some easements around, and just starting fresh with a boundary that connects all of the property corners, and we'll kind of illustrate that a little bit later on. So when it comes to the comprehensive plan guides this project area, specifically this site, for transit-oriented development. TOD development seeks to promote high-density mixed-use development along primary transportation corridors. Some of the guiding principles that I think are important for this project that are specific to this site state that uses should include retail, office, restaurants, and other commercial uses with housing. So check, check, check. Buildings along the east side of Central Avenue should have front walls that abut the sidewalk edge, similar to buildings on the west. That's exactly what's being contemplated. Parking for multifamily should be underground or covered. And redevelopment plan should include public gathering spaces such as plazas. And this site plan you'll see as we move forward does have a small park integrated into the site plan. So it's tailor-made for TOD zoning overlay within the comprehensive plan. So to address some of the more important elements of the PUD district plan, we'll just call it the site plan for everyone's sake. There are no setback requirements within the mixed use district, so the underlying zoning or the PUD district. The proposed setbacks are consistent with that, with existing conditions. So similar to what is currently on site, the bank building is right on the street edge. This building actually pulls it back slightly, and the ramp is right up against the property line as well. So it's a replication more or less of current conditions as it relates to setbacks. And again, there aren't specific standards for either district. And I think moreover, the comprehensive plan guides again putting the buildings up to the street edge in an arrangement similar to what's proposed. Oh, I want to go back one. So, oh, sorry, went the wrong way. So, just to highlight some of the areas and go through parking on the front end. So I would just bring up the City Hall space first. So outlined in blue, the white section is the City Hall portion of the building. And for this space, there's going to be 30 dedicated spaces of parking for City Hall visitors and cafe users that would have controlled access with electronic monitoring. So the access, there's two arrows showing in and out on the north side of the plan off of 40th Avenue into that space. The space that I'm talking about for general City Hall parking is right here, outlined in yellow. All of the spaces within that area are full size and compliant with city code for drive aisle width and parking stall dimension. There is no standard for City Hall parking within the code, so staff has determined a quantity based upon anticipated demand, and we have some ideas about surplus and overflow for large meetings. Right now, it's being contemplated that we will expand the parking north of the library in the lot that's behind the library to include an additional 65 spaces simultaneous to this project. When it comes to City Hall employee parking, it will be outside of the general use for residents and customers that come to City Hall on a daily basis. And it's in the area outlined in green. where the city will have between 35 and 38 spaces that flex between employee parking use during the day and resident use during the evening. As for the cafe space, parking will take place in the area outlined in purple for any internal users of the cafe. We do anticipate that parking for the cafe will also be accommodated along Gould Avenue. The street width of Gould is compliant for one side of parking. Currently, it's signed no parking on the project side of the street, and there is limited parking on the theater side. We would anticipate approaching the Traffic Commission for a request to lift the restriction on the north side of Gould to accommodate on-street parking in the project vicinity. So the cafe right now, we cannot determine a specific parking demand per code because the parking requirements for cafes are based upon seating and dining area capacity, and we have a theoretical cafe that we don't have a layout. So we're proposing, based upon the best information that we have available, that we would say that the demand is up to 8 spaces. That is a recommendation from the developer that's also consistent with an example. If we contemplate that out of 3,400 square feet, 1,100 square feet of that is dining area, we would be required to have 7 stalls. So staff are comfortable that we will have the parking that we need, not knowing the final layout of that cafe space. The standard for that cafe would be 6 at the base and then 1 per 40 square feet of dining, which can be reduced by up to 30% within this district, and that's how we get to the 7 number. So just to outline, the resident area that includes employee flex area is outlined in red, so those spaces outlined in red would also serve as resident parking stalls in addition to City Hall employee use during the day. So a shared parking arrangement, which is actually advocated for in the comprehensive plan, and that's how you can get some of the parking count flexibilities per code, up to 30% reduction in the required. So for the resident parking in red, there's 83 spaces in that area, and that includes 26 compact stalls. It's worth noting from the plan that was submitted to you in your packet to tonight, there's been an improvement in the parking situation in this area as well as the underground. 26 compact stalls currently, and it used to be 75. So they've moved some columns around per request from the city to try and eliminate or reduce the number of compact parking stalls within that area, and staff are comfortable with this arrangement. In total, and we'll get to the basement level and this level, the site provides 346 parking spaces in total. So underneath the building, so this is underground parking. This would be resident only, access from a ramp that was on the main floor. So resident only in this vicinity. That includes 174 compact parking stalls, all with compliant drive aisle widths. And we'll get into the ratios for compact stalls a little bit further as we go down the line here and talk about flexibility. So multifamily parking standards specifically to multifamily. The multifamily districts within the city require 1 stall for each bedroom unit and 2 parking stalls for each 2-bedroom or larger unit. Under that equation, the total required number of resident parking stalls is 325. The site plan provides for 316 resident parking stalls, and the zoning ordinance allows for a reduction of up to 30% of those required parking stalls if the site contains bicycle, transit, or pedestrian access or shared parking agreements between uses, both of which are on this site. Since the site has these features, the required parking at this site could be as low as 227 or 228 per code, which is significantly less than the proposed of 316 resident stalls. So 325 by the full extent of the code, 316 provided for residents only. That's a 3% reduction in the maximum per code, when you could go up to as low as 228 with the reduction that's built into the mixed-use zoning. By that math, you know, you could consider that there's an 88 stall surplus, and we think that this is a very workable solution. With that said, we do recommend that we approve a total of 310 required resident parking stalls, so not the full 316, but the 310. This would allow for a buffer that accommodates final construction plan designs, and that would represent a reduction of 5%, again, well below the 30% that's allowed by code. We just want to be cognizant of the fact that these are entitlement scale plans, and once all of the column placements are determined, all of the HVAC equipment has been located, that we could lose some stalls, we could also gain some. So when we go to set the number, we want something that we think is going to accommodate that, so we don't have to come back through Planning Commission and City Council to make that adjustment. When it comes to compact stalls, the maximum allowed by code when we apply the standard to this plan is 129. So it shows a total of 200 compact parking stalls for the resident parking only. In parking lots with more than 300 spaces, the city code allows for up to 40% be designated as compact. The site plan proposes 63 to be designated as compact, and the developer has indicated that that arrangement is representative of the similar projects that they've completed recently in the area, and staff is supportive of providing this increased percentage of compact stalls as a PUD flexibility. Because we just need to maximize parking. It really affects the residents more than anyone, and that's something that they can market and control on their end. Resident and visitor parking, again, is code compliant. So again, with that said, we'd like to build in a buffer and approve a maximum total of 210 or 60% compact to allow for final construction design, and this flexibility is definitely one of the considerations that can be made through the PUD process. So when it comes to multifamily density standards, the second significant PUD change as it relates to this project, again, mixed-use development district allows for up to 30 units per acre with certain conditions that are met by this project. That ratio would allow for 66 units on the property. Staff believes that that standard is unusually strict for a municipality like Columbia Heights, and the ratio is out of alignment with Metropolitan Council planning guidelines for TOD development. In 2011, the Metro Transit actually designated Central Avenue through Columbia Heights as a high-demand urban transitway corridor. That designation calls for the eventual implementation of a bus rapid transit or BRT route along the corridor. One of the primary features of that designation within Columbia Heights is the transit center that's located just across the street from this subject property. The Met Council recommends residential density ranges for urban center development sites within a half mile of a BRT route is at a 40 unit per acre minimum with up to 75 plus per acre and no cap. So I think the comprehensive plan designates this as a TOD development district, and our density standards are behind as it relates to development in the region that's of this type. And that goes back to one of the primary reasons I think in researching the history of the mixed-use development district is that it wasn't fitting the needs of significant redevelopment, specifically in the TOD designations, and that's why the city elected to bring back the PUD rather. It's for instances just like this. So we would recommend that the commission and council approve a maximum total density of 265 units for the site. That's a 116 unit per acre ratio, and that flexibility can be offered through the PUD zoning classification. When it comes to easements and plats, this is that messy survey that I alluded to earlier. So the underlying parcels and plat boundaries would be wiped clean. Right now, that includes 5 parcels. This is the Northeast Bank Building. This is the Plaza parcel. This is a little connector between the ramp and the building. This is the ramp parcel, and this is the Gould Avenue parcel. All of these would be removed, the boundaries erased, and you would be left with an arrangement that looks like this. So property boundary, essentially connecting all of the corners of the underlying boundary parcels to create one new lot and block for the subject property. When it comes to the easements that we're going to ask to be vacated, there's one along Central Avenue outlined in blue. It's not an entire vacation, it's a realignment rather, so the dark shaded area would remain and the lighter shaded area would be vacated. This would make room for a realignment of a trunk water main that goes through this area, and that's being reviewed, of course, by the city engineer in conjunction with their project team. This alleyway easement runs right through the between the bank building and the ramp, and that would be completely vacated and removed. So those are the 2 easements that are part of the vacation conversation. So when it comes to access and loading, we'd like to discuss a few areas. So access again into the structured parking and ultimately the underground parking is off of 40th Avenue. Both of the curb cuts onto 40th are 2-way, so in and out with the arrows there. It's an elimination of 2 curb cuts, so we're going from 4 to 2, which from the perspective of the county, this being a county road is obviously something that they're excited about and is better for the proximity to the intersection. Right now, if you're familiar with the Plaza curb cut, it's just a long curb cut that goes along that entire area, and that will all be eliminated. When it comes to loading operations for the cafe, there's a couple of options. Highlighted in red in the little rectangle is a no parking area within the structured parking that would serve for minor deliveries for the cafe. We do anticipate that some delivery activity would also take place off of Gould for the cafe. Non-residential uses less than 5,000 square feet don't require a loading area to be provided. So we just would like a little bit more narrative from the applicant as to how they would handle that. And we've already started some conversations about how they would integrate that with timing and coordinate it. And we could also utilize the portico share, the entrance there outlined in blue. That'll be a loading and delivery area for packages to the residents, UPS, FedEx, etc. There's also going to be a couple of parking stalls integrated into that front entrance for visitor parking and could accommodate cafe deliveries to some extent as well. When it comes to the primary delivery and loading movements for the structured parking, the arrows in green kind of outline that traffic flow. So they would come in on the eastern entrance into the structured parking area and move through the site in a fashion shown. That's the maneuver for move-ins, certainly. So all the move-in activity is internal to the site, which is a really tremendous asset to the design, in our opinion. They can stop in this loading area here, offload, and get right into an elevator bank and move their furniture and other items up throughout the building. So we're not parking moving trucks on any of the streets in the surrounding area. And we're also talking about ways that we can work to bring City Hall deliveries in through a similar mechanism, and we can coordinate that with electronic access. And we just need to work out some of the details that would allow for that. But it's a very efficient delivery and loading maneuver to serve City Hall and the apartments, in staff's opinion. When it comes to landscaping and open space, the site includes a public park on the west side of the property, labeled Pocket Park because it's small. So in this vicinity, I think I do call it out. Although it's small in stature, I think it's one of the more important and cool design elements to the entire site plan that emerged from the very beginning, suggested by the developer as a way to activate the space between the cafe and the city hall. This pocket park actually looks into what would be the eventual city council chambers area and should create a nice space for activity. It will include public space, benches, tables, and some plantings. And beyond that, the residential area of the site also includes other private open spaces. So we'll get into the amenity deck a little bit later on, but it includes a swimming pool, patio, outdoor grilling, a party deck, and a dog run. So there's the proposed dog run on the east side of the property, where there'll also be stormwater treatment and retention underneath that area. But they've integrated a small dog park into the proposal for resident use only. And then whatever green space is left is predominantly along Central, where we have some ability to offer plantings and trees. Right now, the landscape plan shows 11 trees, including a mix of deciduous and conifer trees. The sizes and diameters are code compliant, and then several other plantings. The city's going to look more intently to Central as part of our new city hall plans and look to maybe introduce some streetscape elements to that corridor that would also serve as crash protection from the roadway. And maybe it's an opportunity to do some branding and set the tone for the next iteration of streetscape that goes through the city, because it's been a while since we've kind of done some improvements on Central. So that is something that we anticipate. And then just some miscellaneous items. So as it relates to utility connections, utility plans show a new water main, again, that runs along Central Avenue to serve the building. It'll connect to an existing water main near the northeast corner of the site. All of the utility plans are very fluid right now, subject to the review and approval of city engineer and fire marshal, all list conditions of approval within the report. Drainage, the stormwater, as far as rate control, so the roof will serve as a basin that temporarily stalls the water from entering the stormwater system as far as rate. And then I'm told by the city engineer that the stormwater plans for the east edge of the site are evolving fairly rapidly and are in a good place, and he's confident that they can meet the standards of the watershed district. And of course, everything will be contingent upon clearing those bars. Exterior building will consist of high quality amenities, glass, brick, and cast stone, fiber, cement, and metal, all of high architectural quality, and will certainly add good value to the neighborhood. Lighting, there isn't a photometric plan submitted. Any exterior light that is included in the ultimate construction plans will have to be subject to review and approval by city staff. Right now, Anoka County and MnDOT both have full sets of plans and are reviewing this project. Of course, County Road 40 is a Anoka County jurisdiction. We've gotten some preliminary comments. Obviously, very satisfied with the reduction in curb cuts. MnDOT did give their review back that was included in your report, and there was no significant requirements, just items related to permitting and activity within their right-of-way. Just to go through some of the amenities quickly. So this is a second floor plan. I wanted to highlight the amenity deck. So on the second floor, you have all the pool and grilling stations and outdoor amenities for the residents, as well as a fitness center, club room, a co-working area. In this area, kind of outlined in blue. So again, when we go to high-end amenities, this site has all of the top-of-class resident amenities that we see within the market in any project. The sixth floor is worth highlighting because of the box outlined in red is Sky Lounge. So there'll be an amenity on the sixth floor that has the views of downtown, that has a patio deck And then interior to that in the yellow space is an entertainment suite that residents can rent out for different events that has kitchen facilities and things like that. And then again, just to go through some of the renderings for perspective, this is looking essentially if we were standing at Fairview Clinic, looking southeast more or less. City Hall outlined in red. The Sky Lounge up there on the 6th floor. Another perspective looking Gould Avenue and Central, Gould and Central, leasing offices and primary resident entrance for leasing activity and visitors. City Hall again, Sky Lounge, and the cafe space. So with that, staff would certainly stand for any questions that the commission might have, and we've got several representatives of the developer and architects with us tonight that can answer the more technical questions. But we've got a healthy list of approvals to go through. All of these ultimately pass through to the city council. So I guess when we get to the point about recommending approval of the ordinance amendment, which is a rezoning of the property, which codifies specific development standards to this site that it has to adhere to. The deviations or the PUD flexibilities relate to parking, and we would approve the stall dimensions for the compact stalls, the quantity of compact stalls, and the total number of stalls as shown. And then we'd also be looking for the flexibility of the units per acre within that ordinance.
And you're suggesting there 116 on our packets, it's 120.
Yes, that is a change and correction because after consulting with the developer, they feel that they don't need any sort of buffer built into that,
So
that
we'll-
will absolutely be.
So Shelley, we'll make sure that's 116.
It is 116, yep, that is the correct, yeah.
Thank you. All right, very good. Are there any questions from the commissioners for city staff or the developers?
I got one quick question. Where the pool is on the second floor, is that atrium all open all the way up?
That is open to the air, so that entire second floor amenity deck is outside.
All the way to the top, though?
No, it's out in the open. We don't have a good rendering of that
Because it says
elevation.
level 3, 4, and 5, it appears to be open.
It would be. Yeah.
Perhaps I'm not understanding.
It's not an atrium.
Yeah, there's no atrium. The pool deck is.
It's an outdoor pool?
Oh, yeah, open air. Yep. Thank you.
So the building is kind of a U shape.
Yeah? Well, I'm confused what all that is.
That's open. That's.
Oh, it is open?
Yeah, it's just open to the sky.
Okay.
Yep.
Well,
That's
call
what
it
they're,
an
that's what they're
atrium.
saying. Yeah. Great. Any other
Thank you.
questions?
So on the parking, it's got closed doors that'll be closed even for the city parking plus the apartments?
So resident parking on the east side is electronic access only. Employees would have that, residents would have that as well, delivery people that have been given access. And then the City Hall side, we're still working through the door closing and opening programming. We do know that when it's full, that it will close and it'll be marked with an electronic sign as full so that we don't have
My other
people
question.
pulling in and have no place to park, and there's one turnaround spot in there, which is the loading and delivery area for the cafe. So we know we need to control that movement. As far as during the day for City Hall use, we're still trying to decide what the right control mechanisms are. And I would ask the developer to speak a little more to that because they've been more heavily involved in that operational conversation and how we're going to control the door. When it's open to residents, they won't have to enter a code. They won't have to have, it would be, if it is closed, a vehicle identification sensor that would open it.
Transponder would do it. Is there any way of marking it like they do at the Mall of America, saying you have 6 stalls open at the City Hall end, saying it's only 30 spots?
That's a great question. One of those, that very kind of system was discussed as part of this. It hasn't been contemplated recently. I would defer again to Lattice to comment on that.
Just gonna eliminate, if you doesn't have a full sign, you got one car going in, the second car piggybacks in the back.
Right.
Then you're already.
Right.
Where you're backing people out again.
I mean, there'll be some things that we have to work through, and there'll be instances where there's bottlenecks and a learning curve. But we think that we can manage through that with the various plans and contractual relationships. So this type of arrangement is very prevalent downtown, and we're trying to integrate a mixed-use vertical concept into our community that is certainly different and has some very dynamic parking elements to it. But we have spent a great deal of time working on that, and we'll have agreements that would be approved by the city council ultimately that specify all of those mechanisms, relationships, and contractual obligations.
I just think if it's in the planning stage, it's gonna be way cheaper to put it in than try to add it after.
Indeed.
That's about all I got on the parking.
Good. Anybody else with questions? Eric,
Yeah,
ahead.
I've
Sure,
got
go right ahead.
a couple of them.
Yeah.
Aaron, you mentioned using the roof as water retention as far as the overall stormwater retention system?
No, rate control.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I would defer to.
Okay. That was my question.
Yeah.
Like, are we going blue roof or purple roof
No,
here? Or?
yeah, so
Okay.
just the rate control side of the water management.
Okay. Another question for you, and curious if you could answer how discussions surrounding sustainability happen with this building. Are there strategies that we're exploring? One that jumps out to my mind is we've got a really tall, nice flat roof that's elevated and has great solar access. Solar panels to power City Hall. Any conversations about sustainability for the City Hall portion?
So the biggest advancement in sustainability that we have talked about is in our HVAC system that we're proposing for the apartments as well as the City Hall space, which is a VRF system. So highly efficient as it relates to cost, more expensive on the front end, but energy savings certainly over the long term and environmentally friendly. The solar panel conversation has come up. Right now, I know there aren't any plans for a solar array on the roof. Cost consideration being the driver predominantly, and it's not something that we anticipate building in at this time. And I would defer again to Lattice to provide some more commentary maybe around cost and how that would affect the overall pro forma. But yeah, no solar right now.
Have we gone down the path to figure out kind of ballpark costs to figure out how big of an array would be needed to be provided for City Hall, or what that cost would be?
Have not. So we have not done that analysis. Yeah.
It's cheaper and cheaper every day.
I would love to see it happen. I know we have some counselors that are advocates for solar, certainly. But at this stage in the approval process, I would like to separate the two, but I definitely appreciate your perspective on that.
Okay.
But it would be, I think at this point, it would be a cost solely borne by the city and not in partnership.
Okay, my final question is, I should step back too. I really appreciate a lot of the moves that this building does architecturally. I think it resonates really well on Central Avenue and on 40th, hugging that street, really integrating with the street edge, the urban street edge. My question is on the eastern side, on the residential side, comparing the heights of the existing parking structure that's there currently and its relationship to the single family houses to the east compared to the height of the new proposed building. This is on average 22 to 24 feet taller than the existing parking structure. Have any solar studies been done to kind of determine what the impact on the surrounding residential areas will be, and discussions on maybe utilizing that same care that was done on the street edge on Central and stepping back the mass of the building on the residential side to the east?
The solar study has not been completed. I can confirm that. I would let the architects speak to the nuances of how their design evolved. I do know that the eastern edge certainly does not receive the same level of treatment that the street edges do, and it's more of a blank facade. Again, site limitations obviously dictate us in many ways, and we don't have a chance to significantly move it from where it is. And we had to take every bit of that eastern boundary. I know ultimately there are desires for redevelopment of some of the single-family homes along that corridor. To be perfectly honest, we've engaged some of the residents I know that are here in attendance that live right on that eastern side about what that might look like. I think that is a strategy that we would put significant energy into to try and acquire some additional houses as a buffer as the years go on. So that's what I can offer right now.
Great, thank you. Yeah, well, let's, if these guys haven't had a chance yet.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, you go.
Okay. So my question is primarily about the exterior design, and I realize that we're not a design committee, but in following similar developments, primarily in Minneapolis and St. Paul over the years, there are several examples where the final product doesn't match, there were downgrades from what was originally proposed. And I'm wondering, are there any mechanisms for the city to prevent material downgrades throughout the process, as that's a fairly common thing?
Okay, so I think the primary defense that we have against that is our partnership with this developer, because we're co-locating. We're going to have a very high standard for the city hall portion. I think the types of materials that are being proposed, we need to be consistent with those, but understanding that we do need to provide space for some of those changes, because it is one of the items that does fluctuate. I can tell you that the color palette might receive some alterations specifically as we seek to accentuate the city hall portion. But we are involved with those decisions every step of the way, and we do have development contracts subsequent to this where we can secure specifications for that if they should deviate, beyond something that staff is comfortable with. We, as a project partner, there's development agreements for the tax increment financing, there's agreements for our co-location, and I feel that we can meet your expectations with the ultimate material selection, but not asking to lock them down to exactly what the renderings and what's been presented, but like materials and of the same quality.
So yeah, at this point in the metro area, there are plenty of examples of very large-scale 6-story developments, and it seems like, especially as some of these projects age, there's a pretty big difference in buildings that were built with higher quality materials. So that would be rather distressing to see, some stone or brick replaced with precast concrete or the like.
That would never, we can't allow that, so that would never be an exchange that we would be accepting of, as an example.
Okay.
I think we could ask the developer to comment on some of that too. The expectation of the city hall is that we're creating an institutional grade building that should last 60 years, and we want to have a partner that has similar concerns within reason. So I think we did spend quite a bit of time talking about this very dynamic and previous examples where making minor adjustments to percentages of certain types of stone, for example, required full review, even if it fluctuated by a few percentage, and that's something that we didn't want to impose on this developer. And again, I think it's the partnership dynamic that we're going to lean in on to create something that the city wants to be locating with, as well as what's going to work for the overall budget of the project. So,
well, thank you. That's
yeah.
helpful. I have a couple other questions that are related to that. You mentioned the HVAC unit for the building. Just to be clear, there are no magic packs, or I think is what they're referred to, individual venting HVAC units for every unit that will not be part of this?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. So no penetrating individual HVAC units or grates on the exterior of every unit, all internal to the building through piping that just carries gases for both heating and cooling.
And that should be quite a bit more efficient, I believe, as well, right?
Yeah, Aladdis and Doran can speak to that more intelligently than I can, but exponentially more efficient from a fossil fuel perspective as well as a cost. Well, they're obviously related.
Sure.
Less energy. Yeah.
Well, I had just one other question, and, just since we don't have the ability to, have a full 360 view of the building, are there going to be places where first floor parking is screened to the outside, whether that's with like false windows or metal grating or anything like that?
So all of the parking is internal to the building. The structured parking is completely covered. And then the only external parking would be the portico share, like two spaces here. And there is a small planting belt in front of those. But all of the, maybe we have it.
Yeah, can we look at the first floor?
Yeah, let me try and get back to there if I can. Sorry, I did all these fancy. It's not very conducive to going back. I used to be in the habit of putting all of the slides at the end. That might be coming up. So, but it is. It's easy to get confused. It's a very challenging layout that really is cool as it relates to the elevations that it's created because of the elevation change on Gould in particular. So 40th is pretty flat and Gould goes up, to the east. So the project is built into the hillside on this corner. So you have, less than 6 stories exposed here, and then you have a full 6 at the street edge. Along 40th, it's a full 6 stories all the way along. But all of this parking could be viewed through these 2 access points because it's completely covered by the building above it.
That's wonderful. I think that's one of the very best parts of the whole project.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's.
I believe on 40th, you have 2 condominiums or townhouses that cover
Right.
the parking area.
Thank you, Commissioner Vitsky. These townhome units that face 40th, their parking is still internal into this area, but they do have patios on 40th. Townhomes by name, but they will be rental units. They won't be for sale.
All right, well, that covers my questions. Thank you.
I'm wondering about we're looking at part of this as an ordinance amendment, and in 4 years on this commission, don't remember a whole lot of those.
Yeah.
So how far out of the ordinary are we in essentially wiping the entire acreage clean and then starting with new ordinance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it used to be common practice because we had PUD districts in the 70s that did this very thing. And an ordinance amendment is just a text amendment, so a physical change. This gets codified as a PUD district, in this case 22001, 2020, the first one. And within the ordinance, it's going to be labeled as that. And the development standards that we seek to approve are specific to this site. They don't apply anywhere else. So if there was an amendment or down the road, developer, owner comes in and says, I'd like to change X, we would look at those standards that we approved here, see if it's compliant, and if not, we would have to amend, to create space for any sort of significant change. Planned unit development zoning is a tool that's used, all over our metropolitan area, in almost every community, and again, has been around for a long time. We thought that the mixed use designation was a co-equal replacement for that, but although there's many flexibilities within the mixed use designation, it does not provide the same flexibility that PUD does to specifically go in and say, these are the objectives of this site, and this is exactly what we want. And it's a give and take. The expectation within, you know, this process is that it's for the higher valued, more complex, significant projects. You wouldn't do a PUD for the assisted living project, you know, would be a good example. It doesn't rise to that level under most circumstances. Mixed use vertically, this is the tool to achieve that.
So then if the cafe/coffee shop space right now is planned in, but there's nobody behind it yet, is that right?
That's correct.
So if, say, it stays there like that for a while and then someone approaches saying they want to open a bookstore or just anything that's drastically different, what does that mean? We're kind of back to the drawing board with that one space to define inside the ordinance what
Right.
can go in?
Yeah, at that point, that would be an amendment to the PUD district.
Okay.
So a change from cafe or restaurant in this case is the term food service, I believe, is our definition within the ordinance. So anything outside of the food classification, cafe, coffee shop, convenience restaurant, would require an amendment to the plan. I think which is definitely feasible and would be a pretty straightforward, doable process. I think the default, and again, I would allow Aladis to speak to it as far as why they think coffee shop is the designation to go with and the most confident, you know, user of that space that they've engaged with. So I think it obviously plays nicely with City Hall from a staff perspective. And then again, the resident, they anticipate, you know, the residents being primary users of that facility as well.
All right, very good.
I had just one other question. I think you said it was 21,000 square feet for the City Hall portion?
Slightly under 20,650.
Okay. How does that compare to what the city has now?
It's a good question. So this building used to be more than just city administrative offices. It used to be the fire station and the police station. And I think we're 38 or 35,000. And the space that we've designated was derived from a space needs analysis completed over the course of a few years in partnership with Leo A. Daly, who looked at all of the site selection possibilities within the city for the new City Hall and programming for the staff needs. And that's where that number comes from, and it's consistent with all of those early configurations at other locations.
Is there some, you know, kind of buffer space, you know, that's included in that? I guess I'm
Yeah.
getting at, how confident are you that this is enough space for City Hall for a long time?
So our thought process and approach on that is if we do anything, we should be heading in the opposite direction, so that we need to decrease, you know, staff capacity whenever possible and become more efficient. And that thought process was integrated into the planning of how the departments work together in this space and how we might look to be more efficient with particular positions over the years. You know, there's no anticipated layoffs as part of this. Just get that out there. But it has that in mind to trend into the more efficient direction. We've built in as much buffer as we can, but to your point, it is a tight site. You know, we are living on as little as we think we can, and the driver of that from an administrative perspective is the cost and the opportunity to have a significant cost savings by being built into this broader development. In the opinion of the city council who made the ruling, it was a worthwhile endeavor in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess at this point, it would make sense to have, okay, go ahead,
Please.
Yeah, please.
Park dedication fee.
absolutely, yeah.
The way I figure it, if my math is right, this will be 2% of the population of Columbia Heights. And if you don't have a park dedication fee, what value would you use for the land when you figure out the park dedication?
I'm confused about the 2% of the
Well, no, you've
population.
got 400 people,
Okay.
2% of Columbia Heights.
Okay,
So I would expect a fairly
What threw me
decent
off
park.
is that is not the standard in the ordinance. So 10% of value of the parcel in question, and we're working to assign that value right
Is
now.
that the value of the purchase plus demolition?
We're not entirely sure. We do need to negotiate that with the developer. We do need to extract space for the pocket park and give them credit for that. That is a park. And we're looking at conversations with the city manager and the development team have looked at finding an appropriate valuation based on the complexity of this site, which includes city-owned property, and all of the other parcels, and how do we come to a collective agreement of what's suitable and appropriate. So it'll be a valuation, 10%, that's the code. So we once we determine a value, and the code does say that it just has to be mutually agreeable between the city council and the developer. So it does leave the buffer that we're asking for, that it will be secured and it is a condition of approval. But we do need to negotiate that price.
Parks need money.
I agree. It will be adding significant amount of residents to the area. We do have LaBelle Park right across the street, which should see significant increase in use. And that's exactly what park dedication is there for.
I guess at this point, it might be helpful to have the architect and the developer kind of come up and maybe address some of the issues that have been raised here. Would that be all right with the commission?
Good evening, everyone. Hi, Commissioners. Thank you guys for having us tonight. I'm sure Aaron's getting sick of us calling him and bugging him through all these questions, but thank you for having us.
Could you state your name?
Yeah, my name's Chris Osmondson. I'm the Director of Development with Alatus. And I've got Barrett, who's an associate with us. I've got Ben with Doran and Mark with Alliance. So we will all try to address these questions. So I'll get through a few of them and then call up people kind of as needed. And if you've got anything, please start. And then I was taking notes in the back.
No, I think let's start with that first.
Okay. So parking systems. There's a lot of integration going on in here. Do you have the pointer? When I was 10, they banned all these, and now they're coming back into style. So off of 40th here, this will be the primary residential entry. And how that would work is that the residents, as well as city staff, would have a parking fob, or it might even just be, like an overhead door opener. And they would come in there, and that's a two-way location. And as Aaron mentioned, this is kind of the main drive move. However, to the south here, this is how you go down to P1 as well. So pretty easy drive movements here. City staff would be in these flex locations, and we can speak more about that later. The other main entryway, so this is entirely controlled and securitized. The other main entryway would have a ski data entry system, and this would have digital signage, so it would be able to display available space counts, as well as say full if it is, so that you don't have to hammerhead in and back out. So you shouldn't have that situation present itself. And what I think, and what we're still trying to discuss here is, in the summertime, or at least in warmer months, this would be gated, and in the evening, there would actually be an overhead door that would come down to securely close that. And then in the wintertime, that would, that gate and then the door would also always come down. Just, we're not allowed to temper, this will be tempered, but we can't condition commercial spaces. So while this is still internal, it's not as if we can heat this, but we want to do our best to make sure that's, secured. And if we've got any 2-foot snowdrifts coming in, that wouldn't happen. And what would happen, I believe, there's 2 ways to do this. Everyone could take a ticket, and as long as it's between certain sort of hours of business, that ticket could just be pre-validated, so they just stick the ticket back in when you're leaving. Or it could be such that someone comes in, gets a ticket, and would validate with a member of staff, such that it's free for them to come in and leave as they choose. Is that helpful?
So just I heard you say the word free. That means that part of the parking ramp is completely, there's no cost involved.
Yep. So so it's public. I guess we've called it kind of public transient. And again, that's 30 stalls, all standard, and it would be for a mix of, coffee shop, but it is predominantly for, these types of meetings where you'll have, a lot of people in attendance. Is that helpful?
Yeah, keep going.
Any other questions on that?
Any other questions on the parking?
Nope.
Okay, great. Let's see, what else do I have here? I'll let Alliant talk through stormwater. I think Aaron had most of it right, but Mark can get to that, so I'll kind of go through these other points. So on sustainability, I'll talk a little bit about the VRF system and also solar and a little bit of the utility grid. So the VRF system, just for a little bit more addition, it's a really cool system. You won't see those external louvers that you see with the Magic Pack systems. VRF stands for Variable Refrigerant Flow. So if you're familiar with historic projects or a lot of larger kind of mid-rise or high-rise projects have heat pump systems, so it's more of a circulatory and truly centralized heating system. VRF is the same thing. In a heat pump system, you're typically moving water around. VRF moves gas around. So it can take potentially cooler areas and relocate that to a hotter area and balance it more efficiently than just having your own sort of proprietary HVAC system. And so that would be used for all of the residential units as well as the city's hall space and the heating and cooling for the cafe. And that is, it's not a net zero system, but it is primarily powered by electric. You can buy the electric off of the renewable grid, and really the only fossil fuel that goes into there is if it's less than 10 degrees, the VRF frames have trouble extracting heat from less than 10 degrees, and therefore you need to have kind of a gas-powered space heater that allows them to extract a little bit more heat from that space. And that's really the only gas or fossil fuel that plays into this HVAC system. And overall, that results in a reduction in just terms of straight energy usage of about 45 to 30%, kind of depending on who the user is. And that, while it does cost the project more, that additional gain from having less utility costs, that all goes to the resident. So you can see pretty dramatic reductions in your heating and cooling costs. Utility bills can be, if an average is 100, they can be 50 frequently. So that just kind of reduces and increases the affordability of being able to live here as well. And it's not really a huge benefit for us. With solar, we've talked about it a little bit. I think the technology is decreasing all the time. I think one thing, as Aaron mentioned, the cost that's really going to be borne here that isn't decreasing is the structural components of this. You still need to appropriately build the stick frame to accommodate for the solar array that would need to go on the roof. So even if we were going to plan as a condition for that, there would still be costs associated with it. So with Xcel's ability to buy from a renewable energy grid without doing your own adjacent county solar farm, that's a nice alternative to still present a fairly sustainable component. So I think we're working towards that, and there's other parking components, shared parking. We're trying to eat into that by not having 400 stalls or something like that. I'll let Ben talk about some of the screening, or at least kind of the eastern component here. But as Aaron did mention, all of the parking is essentially screened, so it's not like you're going to have a flat wall facing you. It should be very articulated and complementary, as opposed to just a structured parking location, similar to what we have to the northwest there. I think that was a little bit, I guess the last thing, at least from our standpoint, so with respect to the retail location here, our idea is that that's a local use. So, by no means is that something that kind of makes or breaks the economic feasibility of this project. The idea is to get a really good user in there. We've sort of over-engineered the size of the space, But if we could get something that's even 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, we feel that that's nice because that can allow more of an entrepreneurial use to go in there so that their lease isn't so large that they've got to do X amount of business to stay in this location. So that's really what we're going for. I don't think it's a full-service restaurant. It could be something, I mean, we've talked about something like a Hazel's, if that would want to go in there, if you've been there, and kind of the North Minneapolis, or I should say Northeast Minneapolis corridor coffee shop. I think we would have less of a desire for something like a bookstore, really because that's not as active of a use. You're not going to have activity in there after 5, 6 p.m. Maybe you would, but this would also be a lot more accretive as kind of a food service, grab and go, or even sit down for staff members, residents, and community members alike, especially when the theater's got something going on or church is coming out on Sunday. So I think that's all I had. Any other questions?
Yeah, are there any other questions at this point? Great, and yeah, let's
Okay.
call up your guests.
I actually do have one.
Okay,
quick
great,
one.
thanks.
Just, my job is writing about restaurant delivery services and
Sure.
thinking about that and Amazon.
Yep.
Would package deliveries be under this awning on the Gould side?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Commissioner. So, and Aaron and I just talked about this yesterday because we realized we'd put a lot of effort into the residential component, but we needed to discuss the circulation. So right now, in terms of the 265 market rate units, there is a drop. This is a portico share. UPS, FedEx, DHS would come into, is there?
Were you trying to highlight it?
Just go to the.
Probably the
Next plan up.
next one.
Easier said than done.
You're looking at the one for the green arrows, you mean?
Yeah, that one works too.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Well, while he's talking,
sorry.
so they'll, resident drop-offs would primarily function in that portico share.
The rendering, sorry.
Just the one that shows the drop off. The lobby.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, guys, you can keep talking.
No, it's okay. Yeah, so they would come around here, and then this space right here is packaging and mailroom. Mail needs to be on the first floor for ADA accessibility issues, so for residents, they're just gonna go right in here. For the deliveries, of sort of a normal standard box truck size, right now, what we're anticipating is they would go through this motion if it's for either the cafe or, mail or deliveries for City Hall would come from 40th and go through, stop most likely at the kind of the move-in corridor that we have for residents, and then we'll just be able to grant them access in so that they can make their deliveries all internal. And that's worked pretty well. The nice thing about this is we use a system called Butterfly MX so that the USPS and the postal service carriers get a QR code and they can just scan it, and then they don't have to interact with any members of staff or any members of City Hall or the cafe. So it's kind of a cool system, and it's securitized, takes a picture of them, and we haven't had any issues with it.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, if you wanna.
Then you wanna, let's see, what notes did I have here?
I believe you.
Probably-
Eastern side.
Yeah, just the eastern side, kind of? Yeah.
I'm Ben Lindow, design architect with Doran Companies for this project, working with Lattice and Alliant and Aaron to produce what we have here today. So the question about, there were two that I had, and I believe you've already addressed them, but just to add on it, so the screening around the building, the intention is to have it active, so that you have apartments where people live in them, you have an entry with a lobby, you have a coffee shop, you have the city hall. Even on that north side, we have a bike repair room right there and townhomes, so that the whole thing is wrapped with activity, so that you don't have any on-street parking that's visible. It all just goes internal. And that's really a part of mixed-use development and urban design to get those cars off the street and make the streets more pedestrian-oriented. And then the second one with the solar, the studies, the main ones we did were for the pool deck, so that the shadows would, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, we don't have the pool deck in shadow. And then the residents on the east side, they would be in shadow in the evening. And Aaron addressed that with talking to those property owners to create a buffer there. So, and if you have any other detailed questions on the building design, I can address those, but they've done a fantastic job. And
Are there any
job very
questions,
easy.
any more questions for him? All right, thank you very much. And I think we had the other question was on the
Yep, stormwater.
Stormwater.
The one thing I was gonna point out is that you can't really, you can't tell as well on here is that because of the grade change, there's a 12-foot grade change basically between here and here. And so, with respect to this household, this will really be units here. You won't be seeing just a flat face of the underground parking structure. And then as this steps down, this will be a little exposed, but this is still probably half underground, so you shouldn't really have anywhere where there's just like a wall of masonry stone or something like that exposed. It should be nice and active.
And it's also worth noting on other jobs that we've done, when it's directly against a residential area like that, they don't want to see 100 balconies on the wall.
Yep.
They want to have it more private. So the way we've addressed this is we've eliminated all balconies on that east side, so that the residents that are there do have a better sense of privacy. And then the same standard of quality with the material on, except for City Hall, which has a higher level of quality on the material, is the same on the east as there is around the entire building. So there really is no, it doesn't have as many ins and outs, it's more straight, but the quality of the material will be the same.
All right, very good, thank you. And then there was a comment on the stormwater, thank you, yes.
Hello, I'm Mark Carmick with Alliant Engineering. And yes, we've been working with Kevin, the City Engineer and Public Works Director, on the stormwater requirements. And there's actually some catch basins on Gould that currently go through what appears to be an alley between the bank building and the parking lot, that we're gonna reroute around the east side of the building and take it through the alley. And as part of that area on the east side, one of the requirements is to do infiltration, but it's common for the area that it's clay soils, so we're not able to do the infiltration. So if you can't do that, you need to filtrate. So we're gonna have a system over there that has larger pipes with drain tile and a sand bed below, and we'll be taking that through that to filter the water. Although, you know, this site isn't like a normal parking lot. It's enclosed. Where the cars are, all that'll go to sanitary sewer, so you have a lot less pollutants in the water. It's all, you know, it's generally all roof water, so we're confident with that we'll have a good system.
Very good. Any other questions then at this point? All right, thank you very much. Excuse me. At this point then, we will open a public hearing, and if you have any comments, please come on up, and if you haven't filled out a card, please fill out a card.
Don't want to lose that one.
Hi, my name is Amada Marcus Simla. I had a couple of questions. I was wondering if there'll be any requests for electric vehicle charging stations? Okay.
Yeah, we will integrate those. Yep.
Awesome. And then
I'm
also.
sorry, I didn't hear the answer. What was the answer?
The answer was
You will.
yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'm not sure about the count yet, but we try to integrate as many of those as we can.
Great. And I would also, if they could be the superchargers, that would be much quicker. Otherwise, someone will sit there for 24 hours, and that's not going to help anyone except one car. And then you had mentioned the renewable energy from Excel.
Yep.
And was wondering, so is that how it's going to be for all the units, or for the whole building?
If you're going to address, you have to come on up here to answer a question, but so please come on up and answer. Yeah.
So a resident can elect to buy renewable energy off of Excel. It's it's $2, I believe, per month. And then that designates that it's typically coming from either a wind farm or a solar farm that's off-site. And then we can do that commercially as well. So that is what we'll work with Excel to figure out that the electrical component. Gas is just gas. There's not really a renewable source on that one yet. So, but that's a really small use compared to, it's a tenth of the use compared to the electric.
And then another question is the city hall then looking to purchase their energy through the same
I don't know, Connie, do you want to
system?
address that maybe, or?
As far as I understand, we're gonna have our own electric bill and gas bill, so that'll be separate, but, we already have a subscription to, Solar Gardens for that, so I imagine we're gonna continue that.
My assumption, it would carry over. The city hall would be utilizing the same HVAC system. Our own contained, it's our unit, but exact same
But
type.
purchasing it through the renewable.
If that arrangement is in place, I don't know why we wouldn't continue that.
Right.
Cool, okay.
As far as I know, unless something comes up, I can't imagine. It hasn't been brought up yet or discussed, but it's a good question.
Thank you.
Double check.
Thank you very much.
And follow up to that question, how much of the current energy is offset by that solar program?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've asked to see, like, when we started putting in solar for our liquor stores and the library, and we have it on Public Works, what our baseline was so we could see. But right now, we're not saving anything yet until we bought the solar panels were purchased by a company where they get the benefit for the first 15 years. So maybe then we'll start seeing where the city is actually saving money on our electric bill, because right now, they haven't told me. I've asked and I haven't gotten an answer yet, so.
All right, thank you, Connie.
Yep.
Any other?
My name's Mary Thokus, 3966 Reservoir Boulevard. And I guess the big concern that we have from a church perspective is, like, on Sunday morning, are those 30 spaces going to be open and available to public during that period of time? Or is that not going to be available, since it's not, City Hall isn't open on Sundays?
Sure. Aaron, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I can address that. So the 30 spaces would not be available for church use. But again, I would reiterate that we are expanding the library parking lot to include 65 additional spaces that would be available to you on Sundays.
And you said you were going to go to the traffic commission to try to get more parking spaces on the north side of Gould?
Right. I think that's more serving the project site
Right.
than the church, but certainly it's first come, first serve.
Yeah.
But yeah. The library expansion, I think, really solves the regional issue for many of the users there when we extract the ramp. I mean, and it was a desire of the city to do that expansion before this project, and now this has amplified the need for that. City engineer just submitted design plans to the planning department for review for that lot, and it's anticipated that it would be built this year.
Is there a plan to do something about that little connection between the library and the parking lot? Because people have actually tried to drive across that.
Right. So.
And actually, that would be very helpful if that were a drivable alley through there, so that people who need drop-off either at the theater or who can't walk that far, like myself tonight, could have a drop-off and then get access, easy access, because to get to that parking spot at the library from Gould Avenue, you either have to go out to Central, up to 39th, up and around, or you have to go up Reservoir and then down 39th. There's no easy access across the way for that.
Okay, so the city engineer is aware of that and looking into options. Some as elaborate as a little bridge over the pond, probably not going to happen. So it's in development, and we're looking at that.
Yeah, because I think it's important that that you be able to have a drop-off for the theater and church, and then have access to that parking directly.
I can say there will never be a vehicle access. There won't be a way to drive a car through there, but pedestrians for sure. Yeah. Under no circumstance would we create a corridor for a vehicle. I just don't want any confusion on that.
You mean between the library
Yeah,
and the
behind
church?
the library to the theater parking and church parking, not a vehicle corridor. It would be pedestrian only.
I think you need to rethink that for the access for people, because a lot of the people that go to the theater and to the church are elderly and trying to walk that distance, even though it's a block, by the time you get from that corner over, that's a lot of walking for some of the people. So having a way of arranging a drop-off so then the car can easily get to that new parking space, because otherwise that parking space isn't going to be used
But the
much.
car still can get there. So if somebody drops somebody off at the front of the
Just as
church,
close as the ramp, too.
yeah, whoever can walk that's driving the car can still drive over to the new lot, and that person has to walk. So they're parking in the same spot. That's why I'm confused why it doesn't solve the issue that you're trying to illustrate.
Well, because in order to get to the parking lot, the new parking over
Yeah.
at the library, you'll have to go out, make a left-hand turn onto Central Avenue, another left-hand turn onto 39th Avenue, and then turn into the parking at the library.
Yeah, but why is somebody going from the church to the parking lot? They would be going to the parking lot and then walking to.
I'm dropping off someone who can't,
Yeah,
we
okay.
have buses,
Yeah.
we want to have a bus, but we have people now that do pickups and drop people off at the door, and then they'll go over today to the parking ramp and park in the ramp.
Oh,
That's
it's just
just across the street. That's not a full block. So there needs to be a better access to that parking space for it to be used, because otherwise people aren't going to use it.
Thank you very much. All right. Yep, one more. Here we go.
I was wondering who is using the parking spaces, the City Hall parking spaces then? Is it residents from Friday at 5 o'clock until Monday morning when the staff comes back in, or who is using it during the weekend?
Flex space for residents, visitor parking predominantly, and then cafe, coffee shop.
Okay. Is there any chances that there are city activities on Saturdays? Sometimes we have meetings or something like that, because then there will have to be mixed use of reclaiming the space if there's a
Absolutely.
town hall meeting on a
Yep.
Saturday morning or something like
Right.
that.
So that would be managed through the electronic system, and it would be available for city events on the weekends and evenings. So that's going to be one of the tougher pieces to manage.
Okay.
And we're working through some of the intricacies of that.
I wouldn't want to lose out on having a city space that all of a sudden is sort of tucked into we are unable to use it because we didn't anticipate a certain Saturday afternoon, meeting and.
And again, I would defer to the library overflow that we're building as a viable solution to that as well. And it's anticipated that it will be, so.
Well, and I know that the library has the community room, and and sometimes the city has meetings in the community room, and then we would use the library, but
Yeah.
at the same time, if the library is busy, people are going to City Hall to do a City Hall meeting.
Yeah,
They're not thinking like, well, now I have to also park.
No,
you know.
what I meant is not
Oh.
the library community room, but if you had a meeting on the weekend at City Hall, you could utilize the 65 space overflow parking that we anticipate building. Interchangeable to city lots we can use it for to meet our needs, more creatively, I guess. I think if there's multiple events, one at the library, one at the City Hall, then that's a bottleneck. And I think the other municipal ramp then becomes the third outlet. The Fairview ramp owned by the city, currently underutilized, maybe a third of its capacity. We just undertook a study with Bolton and Menk Engineering. They put up cameras to monitor who's going in and out of it so we can determine what percentage is Fairview and how many users are using that. And we anticipate that it's going to we're going to drive some demand from this project and some of these events in particular over to that ramp as well. And then more fully utilize a city asset that's not being utilized to its full extent. So definitely less convenient, but it was built for that very reason, to regionally serve the entire central business district.
Sure. I think if the 30 spot area could also be more flex, that there's just, you know, if it's almost first come, first serve, if someone's there for an apartment, that's fine. If they're there and they're the 10th customer parking for the coffee shop and it's a Sunday at 2 o'clock, that they move over into the city/residence, that it's a flex space and it can be used, you know, if people are visiting, if they're going to the library or they're going to coffee shop or they're visiting a friend who lives there, so. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your comments. Are there any other public comments right now? Yeah, please.
Yeah, KT Jacobs at 4104 again. I just want to clarify something, that when, at the original work sessions, when this project was proposed, it was very clearly stated that parking, that what we're going to label the City Hall parking, would be available at other times, and that there would be a system that would designate when the residents could use that parking and when it could not. And what I'm hearing now, that the flavor of that is changing. The other thing I think it's important to recognize is you keep talking in terms of we are building 65 additional spots behind the library. That's not been approved yet by council.
That's fair.
So I think we need to be clear in not stating to people who are here listening to that, I mean, I know that this is kind of a side conversation, but it's been brought up. I think we need to go back and look at what the original proposal was based on when it came to the work session, and it was very clear that there would be a very substantial designated area for City Hall in terms of that covered, that street level parking. And and we also have a municipal lot that needs to be utilized, and you just brought up the Fairview parking ramp that is underutilized. So I think there's other factors that enter into this, and we need to be very cautious about saying that something is going to happen when it's not yet been approved.
Thank you.
Hi. I have a concern about access to the library along Central. For those of us that, you know, that
Is
don't
this
drive.
regarding to this project?
Well, yes, because there's going to be demolition and construction
Fair.
along Central Avenue, and will there be, you know, room for us?
What's your concern then? Yeah.
Well, will there be room during construction and demolition?
I see. Okay.
Because that's our library access, pretty much.
Yeah.
So early conversations around phasing and maintaining that corridor have expressed a city desire to always maintain a pedestrian path along Central in front of the project. However, I can't guarantee that it won't be closed down for a period. We don't anticipate.
You're expanding the sidewalk at one point, right? I mean,
Right. There'll be work in that vicinity, so
Right.
intermittent disruptions, but it will be a priority to try and keep that open. However, it is a controlled intersection, and there are other ways to move around, but it is something that we're going to have to. Right, water main that runs right through there. So yeah, it has to be closed for a period to relocate a water main that runs underneath the sidewalk more or less right now. But very aware that to the best of the project's ability, maintain a sidewalk connection as much as possible.
All right. Any other?
I'm sorry, then is there a way that,
Could you come up to the podium, please? Yeah, no, that's all right. Just want to make sure everybody can hear you.
that if we have to cross Central and walk down the other side, can we get some kind of a crosswalk or a stop sign or something so we can cross over to the library? Because right now, there's nothing there.
It's a state aid
Yeah,
highway.
mid-block, no, that could not be, we couldn't do that.
Okay. Thank you.
My name's Steve Barton, and I'm in 960 40th Avenue, right next to the parking ramp. And in their plans, there's a cement wall that's up against our house and a guardrail, and they were talking about eliminating that. would be nice to have that cement wall up during demolition, just for sound deadening, and so it doesn't make any sense that they're gonna tear that wall down.
Can I have Doran maybe comment on the wall and how it relates to construction limits? And it is on city property, so it is slated for removal as part of the project.
I'm the architect arm of the company. We don't have a builder arm here to speak to that, but I will relay that to them.
been a
Because
nice
we can phase
barrier.
our demolition.
I think that's fair, that keep it up as long as we can as a goal, and get some comments on that.
I'll talk to our construction lead and
it's-
get back to you, Aaron, on that.
Right along this property line
Right there, right.
on city property.
It's a nice prefab cement wall.
Right.
And I could ask you questions all night till midnight, because.
We're not going to do that.
I realize that. Like, what happens if there's a car fire in the garage? Does the fire truck fit in the garage doors?
No, a fire truck, a regular size fire truck would not. So
There's a lot of cars that catch on fire right nowadays because of the fuel injection, and the fuel's under pressure.
architecturally, we will be code compliant. There's not fire suppression in the.
There's a 20-foot alley there, and a 20-foot wide road is wide enough for fire apparatus, meaning a fire truck, to access it.
Okay, I think he's talking about in the structured parking, if there's a car fire within, is that correct?
Right, yeah, what happened?
And I'm assuming too, if I may, that the fire chief has significant input in the plans to date. Is that correct?
Indeed, he's reviewed what's available and will provide much further detail when construction plans are fully
So
available.
the building will be completely compliant with any fire codes?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Another question is, wouldn't you want City Hall separate from any other entity? Just for the fact that the problem that you had with the bank, where all of a sudden, let's say they decide to sell the apartment buildings 10 years from now. And then, let's say the new landlord isn't as good as the ones that first put it up. Then what happens?
Right.
So there's
Very fair questions, I think.
many
that-
issues that can come
Right.
up with that. And City Hall should be a separate entity, without relying on someone else or another problem coming up like it's happened in the past.
So the decision to locate here was complex and did involve, of course, the city council making the ultimate decision. The drivers were affordability, being able to save residents, $6 or $7 million versus a standalone option, and then being able to fit and function in a way that we felt would work for our future needs. And then to the longevity, one of our primary concerns is the fact that Alatus will likely sell the building, because we have a good partner in Alatus. We're comfortable with them. We're working together in partnership. So what we want to guard against is the agreements and contracts that we put in place that will give us the right amount of authority to control decisions that are made with future owners and landlords. But the mixed-use arrangement, that's not a new concept. I mean, this, it happens.
Another question I have is, where's the ambulance gonna show up when someone in the apartment has a problem? Where do they pull in?
Portico share on the front of the building, so the primary lobby main entrance.
Okay, now, let's say it's Christmas time and there's 265 units there, and let's say 100 people all have a guest over, and there's 100 cars all of a sudden, now it'd have to be parked somewhere. People have people coming over all the time, it's not like,
The primary visitor parking is anticipated to be at the Fairview Municipal Ramp across the street, which, that'll be the only choice.
they're gonna take people in wheelchairs across some street, and
I suppose
not
that,
everybody's,
Yeah, but it can't be discounted, we can't, it is a tremendous asset.
There's
that-
already parking issues in that neighborhood right now, like, there's the high-rise across the street, and when people come to visit them, they all park in the parking ramp. People that work in that building park in the parking ramp. People ride the bus downtown, park in that parking ramp. The church uses the parking ramp. The Heights Theater uses the parking ramp.
Right.
It's, and all of a sudden now there's gonna be nowhere for a lot of people to park.
There is another ramp across the street that
Right,
needs to
but no
get
one's
used.
gonna, people don't wanna,
If there isn't any other place to park,
Right.
they're gonna go over to the ramp and park in the.
We do have to drive new behavior, and again,
and even like,
well, you can laugh.
Okay, listen here. We're gonna have a conversation, and we're gonna have just one person at a time talking, okay? We're gonna keep this civil. And you've had about 5 minutes now, which is more than anybody else has had. So if you have one more question, we'll let you have one more, all right?
well, like I said, I could ask questions all night.
Right, and we're not gonna do that. You've had ample opportunity. Now, if you have anything that's relevant to the preliminary plat, the vacation of the easements, the PUD planned district, or the zoning ordinance, I really would like to hear those.
For 2 years.
We're not the parking, we're not gonna solve the city's parking right now.
Right, okay, well, how about just.
I understand how frustrating it is.
You know, there's been a lot of construction on 40th Avenue in the past years, and now, for 2 more years, how am I supposed to deal with all this noise and construction, and I'm 10 feet from this project? You know, just, it doesn't make any sense.
No matter what moves in there, there's gonna be noise.
Well, I've been there 48 years, it's been, you know.
So
I was
is it
there
better than a vacant lot or a vacant building?
Well, there we get, now we're talking, I don't know, I don't see why the bank couldn't have worked.
Well,
You know,
unfortunately,
worked
we
for
can't
years, and
control
all of a
that.
sudden we got a new owner, and bad management or something, and all of a sudden we just let it go? Doesn't make any sense.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it and understand that it's not an easy thing to be right next to a project like this.
Right, I don't.
Yeah, thank you.
Especially that wall, I wish they could leave that up for some, you know.
And it
even-
sounds like they're willing to
Even
kind of
once the
work with
apartment
the
is actually
demolition.
built, to have that wall, that wall's been there for so long, it'd be nice just to leave it right where it is, because that's a nice barrier.
Are there any other comments or questions from anyone? If not, obviously, thank you very much, sir. Obviously, it's getting late. We're going to move on unless there are any. At this point, we're going to close the public hearing. We have 4 different sets of motions to go through here. We're starting on page 13. Before we do that, are there any other questions or comments or thoughts from the commissioners? Great. Let's talk about the preliminary plat, then I'll entertain any motions for that section.
Move to waive the reading, is that what you're looking for?
Sure.
For the draft resolution 2020-0204, preliminary and final plat approval, there being ample copies available to the public.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded that we waive the reading of the draft resolution, preliminary and final plat approval, there being ample copies available to the public. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is passed.
Move to a motion to recommend the planning commission recommended the city council approval of the preliminary plat as presented, subject to the following 4 conditions.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend that the planning commission recommend to the city council the approval of the preliminary plat as presented, subject to the 4 conditions printed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. There are 2 motions regarding the vacation of easements.
Just need to make sure I catch up. You know where you're at? 13, right in the middle.
There you go, right there.
Motion to recommend that, or we on move to waive the reading?
Move to waive the reading first.
Move to waive the reading of draft resolutions numbers, not numbered on my sheet. These resolutions, easement vacations, there being ample copies available to the public.
Second. Oh, go
It's
ahead.
been moved and seconded that we waive the reading of the draft resolutions. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
A motion to recommend that the planning commission recommend to the city council approval of the easement vacations as presented, subject to the following conditions, and listed are 2.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend that the planning commission recommend to the city council approval of the easement vacations as presented, subject to the 2 conditions printed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Question for the committee before we get to the PUD, the district plan here. We have the 17 motions, or the 17 conditions that are a part of this motion for the PUD. I would like to discuss adding an 18th condition to the PUD. And that would be in some capacity ensuring that the city council's electric bill is either fully covered by some sort of Excel wind share program, solar program that we're already, it sounds like remembers that, or by the addition of a solar array dedicated to the city council space on the roof of this building. It's, we've talked a lot about tonight about that this is a building for the long haul, that we're investing in this space because it was a cheaper place for us to build. We're saving the residents money, adding the ability to sustainably harvest all of our electricity on site within the very near future becomes a money maker for the city council, if not a money net wash for the city council. And that would just enhance the city's commitment to not only our built environment, but our citizenry being good stewards of the money that our taxes go to help pay for this building. So would like to hear comments from the other commissioners here, and maybe some wordsmithing on how to add that, if approved, how to add that condition to the PUD.
Well, I wouldn't agree with you because it's at the last moment, we're throwing something out. I think the city council knows enough to do anything they can in that direction when we're talking about saving money and energy.
No, yeah, and there certainly is upfront cost to a system like that, but I would challenge a little bit and say this is our opportunity to help guide the city council in recommendation. They certainly don't, correct me if I'm wrong, if we put a condition in there, they have to accept it, or can they strike it?
They can change it completely.
But I want to at least have a conversation maybe that includes the developer, because these are entitlements on their behalf as applicant, and I feel like it might not be fair. And does it impact financing in any way if there's, because that is a cost consideration as far as underwriting and the review of entitlements?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the, just to address the component of kind of the additional capital, again, I think it's, Ben might know a little bit more about this, but we don't have a structural engineer. It's really that you've got to, bolster certain parts of the stick frame more than you otherwise would to accommodate that. And from a financial feasibility standpoint, even with respect to, a form of subsidy that we could work out with the city, just increasing the overall costs of the project, would make it less feasible in the private market. So I guess we can look at that optionality, but I think, typically you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's about a 10-year ROI on the upfront cost to kind of the return on solar. And that's probably also, always going down a little bit. If it's added as a condition, I think it's a consideration we can make. I think we're breaching new sustainability components as we are right now, but it's a conversation we can have with the council, though. But again, adding more costs is tough because it's already getting up there.
And I would like to know that the VRF system is actually something that once the electrical grid goes fully renewable, it's a zero carbon building almost, which is far more innovative in today's time than having solar panels on the roof. So I want to commend them for what they're doing, and just note that system could actually allow you to have an almost zero carbon building as it performs for the next 30, 40, so however many years. So, and the reason why is because it's electric. So if it's the magic packs with the natural gas combustion, you can't really retrofit a building very easily to take it off the natural gas so that it doesn't emit the carbon dioxide with the combustion. But with the electrical, and once the grid goes renewable energy, there's no combustion and no carbon. So otherwise, when it goes below the 10 degrees, but by then there might be a alternative for that too. So I think that's just worth noting.
I think solar panels to serve the city hall space would be most definitely a cost borne by the city, for sure. But how we extract that from placing it on their roof, because we can't place it on ours, we're in their building. I don't know that we would bear that cost to that portion of the structure as well. I don't want to certainly speak for the council's decision to make that expenditure. It is definitely outside of the budget that's been presented and articulated. So I want to be able to have the conversation. I'm reluctant to add it as a condition of approval to this phase of the project.
Well, and there's a difference between requiring panels on the building and requiring that the city is purchasing renewable energy from the utility. And, you know, I'm not sure that that would be something that we could address, but I certainly support the spirit of it.
And maybe adding it to the PUD district plan. I was looking at the four motions that we have in front of us today, and I identified the PUD as the most likely landing spot for this condition. I would absolutely agree. The VRF system is a wonderful system, and not only do you get the added efficiency of the HVAC side, but you get a tighter building envelope because you don't have all of those projections where your insulation is broken. So it's a wonderful system. Yes, when the electrical grid goes renewable, this does completely bring that building offline as far as carbon goes, but we're decades away from a renewable grid. So anything that the city can do, I mean, the systems we've put on the buildings that I've personally done have an ROI closer to 7.5 years. So if we're looking at something, and maybe, like I said, maybe the PUD isn't the spot to do that, but this is, I don't know where else to put it.
Right, it is hard to craft a recommendation like that, I think, right now. I worry about downstream complications from it and what does it tie us to. If it can be in spirit, you know, and we can craft it as such, then I think that's okay. But any sort of requirement, again, the council could strike it at their meeting. It could even be a staff recommendation to do that. If we feel like it can't be accommodated. So I think there is that safety valve, and it certainly no disrespect to the Planning Commission, and I get the intent and I agree with the desire. I think renewable energy policy should be separated from this hearing and placed, you know, on the doorstep of the City Council as a bigger picture conversation. If City Hall was a standalone facility, I think it makes it easier to add that. But even then, I would want, as a staff, some sort of knowledge of their opinion going into this conversation that we're having here as to where they're at on it, because it doesn't fit with the current budget as it sits.
Well, I'd go along with that we put in that we recommend that the city council look at it, and they can do what they want. And, I mean, we defer to your wisdom.
I guess if we're gonna do that, I don't think that's a bad idea. I think that should be a separate, a separate motion, a separate thing that we send to the city council, rather than tying it. Does that sound reasonable to everyone? Because it's ultimately, I mean, I want to make sure you're heard, Eric.
Yep.
But I mean, ultimately, it's going to be their decision whether they want to include this in the PUD or not.
Absolutely.
So I mean, we can put very restrictive language in here if we'd like to, which they can strike. It might actually be more of a topic of discussion if we just politely recommend that they.
I think it would be a
do that.
great
I don't know,
idea.
Connie, do you have any comments on this?
Well, I can't speak for the council, but I think it would be a great idea to add it for discussion. I can't say what'll happen to it, but I think it would be a good thing to add, just so that we know that there's people pushing for it.
So would it be more of give it our best effort and say this is how we think it should be done, or is it more of a discussion of the idea of 100% renewable for City Hall and looking at that as a requirement for the space?
Well, one, I've sent an email to Kevin to double check on whether that subscription covers just City Hall or covers all city electric and find out how much it covers to see how that works first. I've just sent him a text on that, so, so I make sure I get it back. But again, I'm the only one that talks about solar panels on the council right now. So I don't know, I think it's a good thing to bring up. I think it's a good thing for the council to discuss. How you do it, I'm not sure. I don't know if I can give you advice on that, so.
So if there's a way, we can't obligate the developer for any costs associated with this. That, I think, needs to be clear. If it's a city hall improvement, it needs to be clearly directed, you know,
At the city.
at the city.
And I believe that that's not part of the application request that we're considering now, that, like you suggested, is possibly making after you do all your approvals here, is to make that a separate motion for the city council to consider.
Oh, add a fifth motion for this.
Yes, a
We
fifth
can make a
topic.
motion at any point to send to the
Okay.
city council.
Yes, so
for
once
anything.
you get done with these items that you're approving that are on the table, then I would suggest making a motion at that time for them to address that, look into the budgeting, and have a general overall discussion about where they wanna go with it. And
Maybe
that
that's
would be the
cleaner then,
recommend-
and
Yes,
separated from the PUD itself.
exactly.
Is there generally support for that among the commissioners?
Yes.
This is how it's worded.
Of course. All right, well, let's get to that after we finish this then.
It doesn't necessarily-
All right, then let's move on to the PUD motions, which are on page 14.
I move to waive the reading of the draft resolution 2020 whatever, PUD Planning Unit Development District Plan, there being ample copies available to the public.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded that we waive the reading of the draft resolution, Planned Unit Development District Plan, there being ample copies available to the public. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Motion to recommend the Planning Commission recommended the City Council approval of the PUD Planned Unit Development District Plan as presented, subject to the following, how many?
17.
17 conditions.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council the approval of the PUD Planned Unit Development District Plan as presented, subject to the 17 conditions printed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll now move on to the,
May I
yes, go ahead.
interject on the next one?
Absolutely.
We need to make a change to the second provision of the ordinance.
To 116.
Exactly,
That's
thank
right.
you.
And Shelley, I think you had that already, correct? Thank you.
What's that, Ms. Allen?
We're changing the printed units per acre to read, the city council approves the units per acre of up to 116.
Why wouldn't we leave it 120? For some flexibility.
I'm open to that. I know that it would.
I think we should leave it at 116 if that's what they're requesting.
The developer is comfortable with the unit count as stated. We've covered that, right? Okay. Thank you.
Staff did talk about rounding it up and kind of decided in the end that we might as well keep it the way it's presented and rather than offer a buffer in there.
Okay. Very good.
I move to waive the reading of draft ordinance number 1660, PUD District 2020-01, rezoning of property, there being ample copies available to the public.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to waive the reading of draft ordinance number 1660, PUD District 202001, rezoning of property, there being ample copies available to the public. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Motion to recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the ordinance amendment.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend, that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council the approval of the ordinance amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Shelley, when will this be before the City Council?
Monday night, February 10th?
It's complicated, so.
Yeah, I heard a different date, that's why.
A few of the items will be ending with the council on the 10th, and then a few will carry over to the 24th, the second meeting in February, and that'll be the second reading of the ordinance, because that requires 2 readings, and then the Planned Unit Development District Plan final approval on the 24th, because it requires a special public hearing per ordinance.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to other business, which is going to, Eric, do you want to talk us through what you kind of have in mind for this ordinance? Or this,
All right, so
for this recommendation to the city council?
The final recommendation to city council. So, I guess my hope would be the recommendation would include some sort of language asking the city council to do their due diligence on what is the most economical way to provide 100% renewable energy for the city council, or city hall space.
So we're recommending to the city council to look at it, right?
To look at it. What's the easiest,
Or
most
or
economical
encourage the
way?
city
Yeah.
council.
What is the most economical way to achieve 100% renewable energy?
Makes sense to me.
Great.
Same.
Shelley, do you have something along those lines you're writing out right now? Wonderful. Thank you.
So you want to achieve full renewable?
100% renewable.
If it's versus purchasing or
Yeah,
doing it on site.
yeah. Whether it's offsetting credits, if it's a array on the roof.
Okay.
Yeah, there's different vehicles.
Okay, so you're making the motion, we'll wait for a second to have the city council look at ways to achieve 100% renewable energy for the new city hall.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a
Is that-
second?
Is that good?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve this motion as stated. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes, and that can be sent as a message to the city council.
Yes.
Excellent. We have any other business, Aaron?
No other business, other than I would just like to introduce everyone to our newest staff member, Christy Bennett. She's administrative assistant with CD department. The goal is to transfer all of the knowledge that Shelley has into Christy, because Shelley is planning a formal retirement at the end of February, so March 1st, but she's going to hang on with us for at least a year to help make that transition part-time. So very grateful to Shelley and very excited to have Christy on board. So that's about it.
You'll be very much missed.
Well, thank you.
I don't think you're old enough to retire.
There you go. Our next meeting is on Tuesday, March 3rd at 6 p.m. If there's no other business before the commission, I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
I'll make
Without
that motion.
objection, we are adjourned.